Aloha, everyone. This is a podcast, I guess you could say. We'll begin shortly. I'm going to play some music in the meantime while we set up. It shouldn't be very long. Maybe a couple tracks.
Down we go, the river's right. The deeper depths and darker nights. The night will tell if we'll get there in time. Placebo strong as we move along this rushing water's waves. So I don't know what this blue holds for me, but they're saying don't you go a little farther. Now you'll see there's poison in the water, but at the end it's gold. And just hold the phone. You'll see you're not alone, although there's poison in the water, but at the end it's gold. I'm thinking I'll be another's memory if I don't
Check one, check two.
Am I in too deep, or do I
check one, check two.
I started down so long ago. Can I hold on to the only thing that's right? Can I hold on to the only thing I know is gonna guide me? Got me through the night. I see, don't you go a little farther. Now you'll see there's poison in the water,
Check
but
two.
at the end it's good. And just hold the phone. You see you're not alone, although there's poison in the water, but at the end it's good. I'm almost in belief of everything they've told me, unless they're lying through their teeth.
Check five.
If everything I've seen is just my imagination playing tricks on me, don't you go a little farther down. You'll see there's poison in the water, but at the end it's gold. And just hold the phone. You see you're not alone, although there's poison in the water, still at the end it's gold. Though there's poison in the water, still at the end it's gold. Though there's poison in the water, still at the end it's gold.
Nowadays, most of my peers is run out, and that's why I lost the pants somehow.
Wow, there we go. Sorry about that. It gets kind of loud around here. This is Kamahana. Today's program is the first program, and I'm live streaming it to YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So aloha to everyone. I hope we find yourself healthy and well, and if not, know that we are sending prayers. This topic here is on the Red Hill fuel leaks, and this is where I want to begin and stay on. Let me see if I can cue up the next audio. Thank you all for being here. This is the most important subject presently affecting Hawaii to the point that they don't even know if this is going to cause the island to become uninhabitable like Kaho'olawe. There's a lag, so if I talk weird, it's because of that. Aloha to everyone. Here we go.
The U.S. Navy has just poisoned thousands of people in Hawaii with deadly chemicals in their drinking water. And instead of acting to save lives, they're engaging in a massive cover-up. This ongoing disaster is the result of the Navy recklessly storing millions of gallons of fuel, literally 100 feet from Oahu's largest drinking water source. This story should be treated as the national scandal it is, but so far it's been largely absent across major media. Maybe because the culprit is the beloved U.S. military. Before we get into it, watch the man who's been sounding the alarm for years. Hawaii Board of Water Supply Chief Engineer Ernest Lau at a press conference on December 3rd, right after he was forced to shut down the island's essential aquifer.
I think this is a foreshadowing of what could happen to the broader community if we don't do something about the storage of this fuel, over 180 million gallons of diesel and jet fuel, 100 feet above our drinking water aquifer. If we don't do something about eliminating that risk to the water resource, so I think it's time for action now. It is time.
We cannot wait any longer. The water resources is precious. It's irreplaceable. It's pure. There is no substitute for pure water, and our lives depend upon it. So I would urge the decision makers and the Navy to take action immediately to take away this risk from our vital water resources there.
You know, I can't even imagine what was going through Lau's head at that moment, knowing that despite how quickly this current leak is cleaned up, there are already untold amounts of people who could suffer and potentially die from the toxins they've already ingested. Petrochemicals in drinking water are notorious for causing leukemia, miscarriages, and devastating birth defects. We just did an hour-long podcast on this unfolding tragedy, in which you can find many more details about the case linked to in the description below. So, this is all happening at the Red Hill Fuel Storage Facility, owned and operated by the Navy, where since World War II, about 200 million gallons of fuel have been stored in the same rusted-through metal tanks, right on top of this precious and irreplaceable water source. Red Hill has always leaked. A classified Navy report in 1982 reported leaks in the fuel lines, and regular leaks for 40 years prior. Since then, the Navy's own data has shown constant, regular fuel leakage and consistent toxins in the soil that far exceed Department of Health safety standards. We're talking about almost 80 years of this pollution. Once residents became aware of the once top-secret facility in the 90s, they've been calling to shut it down, because obviously it's insane to continue this. But the Navy's always maintained there's nothing to worry about. They test the water all the time. If there was a problem, well, they'd be sure to let you know. Here's a Navy captain in 2016 responding to all the concerns.
Good morning to you, Captain. Good morning, Ron. Good to be here. Top two questions people are asking. Number one, is our drinking water safe? And number two, will it continue to be safe? Yes, Ron. So easy questions to answer. One, the drinking water is safe, and I know that because we test the drinking water exhaustively once every quarter, and we also have ground monitoring wells near Red Hill, which we test on a monthly basis. So we would know if there was any petroleum in the water, the drinking water is safe. Okay.
It turns out that the Navy detected harmful petrochemicals in the drinking water at least 6 months ago. According to Hawaii paper The Star Advertiser, water samples taken by the Navy at its Red Hill drinking water well showed petroleum contamination in July, August, and September. Some of the samples exceeded the state's threshold for what's considered safe. So what did the Navy do when they found these chemicals back in July? Did they tell residents, pregnant women, even their own troops to stop drinking the water? No. Instead, they actively hid the information and refused to comply with the Hawaii Department of Health on giving them the data. The Navy had been constantly failing health inspections at the facility, leading to hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines from the health department, as well as a lawsuit filed by the Sierra Club in November. The only reason the Navy finally admitted something was even happening is that the water began to smell and taste like gasoline, and people began showing up at the emergency room with chemical burns in their mouths.
Today, Amanda just texted me, and it's about 6 o'clock in the morning Hawaii time, Mr. Chairman, that she went to the Tripler emergency room last night because of a headache and irritation in her mouth and throat, and her doctor diagnosed her with chemical burns in her mouth.
The Navy's response to all of this has been predictable. Cover their own asses by any means necessary. Watch this Navy spokesperson lie to the public.
Well, what I would say to that is if you're pregnant, you're concerned, one, obviously drink water that you feel is safe. No evidence to suggest that there's any long-term effects.
It is completely false that there are no long-term side effects of pregnant women drinking these pollutants. Navy command cannot be trusted. Even head of the Hawaii Sierra Club chapter, Wayne Tanaka, stated in November, "We have lost all trust in the local Navy command." And that was before we knew they'd been covering up poisonous water. We have no idea how many people have been impacted so far, how big this leak is, or how much more pollution is still making its way from Red Hill to the drinking water supply. What we do know is that Biden must declare a state of emergency to help this community, and that the Navy must finally do what Hawaiians have been demanding for decades. Shut down Red Hill. It's not like they don't have the money to do what's urgently needed. Move the fuel tanks, relocate the residents, and pay for remediation cleanup and lifetime health care for all potential victims. Right now, the Navy is refusing to do any of that, and they're actually saying they need 5 months to fix the leak, and until 2045 to make it totally safe. No matter what happens with this current contamination, this same thing is guaranteed to happen again and again, as long as this totally pointless, decaying facility remains there. We know from the military's horrific legacy of water contamination, from Camp Lejeune to Coldwater Creek, that the standard response is to cover up their pollution as long as possible. And once people start dying and they can't hide it anymore, deny responsibility and health claims by the people they have poisoned. This has happened to so many communities in the US and around the world living near current and former US bases. We cannot let it happen again at Red Hill. As Lau said, water is life. Water is the most sacred substance on earth that sustains all life. How can we trust a government that intentionally dumps its toxic waste into this precious resource? How can we believe an entity that has done nothing but lie and cover up its criminal actions, proving time and again it values money over human life? It's important to remember that Hawaii was just another colonial military outpost of the empire, which was denied statehood rights until 1959. Today, 22% of Oahu's land is occupied by the US military, with even more land remnants of former military installations. We can see that colonial relationship continue to play out in the Red Hill crisis. Hawaii's own Department of Health, Board of Water Supply, and elected officials are totally at the mercy of the local Navy command. If this is what the military leaders are doing to not only its own citizens, but its own service members, just imagine what it's doing to the people who live near US bases abroad, where the military isn't subject to any regulations or EPA oversight. How many more places are being poisoned? How many more red hills are there?
That's the end of that. That is the update as to exactly what's going down around here. I hear a lot of echo. Do you hear a lot of echo? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I might have to redo this whole thing, but for now, I'll continue. I've got audio to share with you. That sounds better, yeah. Audio to share with you. And if you have any questions, put it in the comment section. That'd be awesome if you want to ask some questions. What's up with the echo though? Give me a second, let me check this out first. For a moment. I don't think she was echoing, so what do we turn that on first of all? Then check in here. That was Empire Files, if you were wondering who that was. Oh, there we go. Not that. Empire Files. Do you have a thing? They have a stance against the military that is quite famous. But what I like about it is they quote our board of water supply, they quote our military, well I shouldn't say our, it's very much not our military. Let me see if I can turn this volume up for you. Yeah, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Alright. I hope wherever you are, you're having a great night and that you're ready to learn about Red Hill. So let's get this going. Next, we're going to hear Red Alert at Red Hill, Navy disaster, poison Hawaii.
From what we know is going on right now. And as you mentioned, this decoupling of the idea that the military cares about us, that it's not just this extension of this profit-making apparatus. I mean, we really need to start the political education to the people in this country who are completely indoctrinated and really do believe that the military is, you know, is looking out for our best interests. And I don't know the best way to do that. I think that your work is really crucial to that. We're trying to do our part as well, but it just seems like it's so deep-seated, and it's really difficult to kind of unlock that. I don't know. I mean, and also there's just this huge gap because of the war on terror and like re-propagandizing of just academia and a lot of lack of connecting all of these issues together of the environmental havoc that's wreaked from the military-industrial complex. Lori, let's talk about accountability, what it really would look like there in the immediate term and long term. Of course, the immediate relocation of these fuel tanks is, I think, the number one thing that everyone can understand is absolutely necessary. I mean, what do you think? What are local residents calling for? A state of emergency? What is being laid out in terms of advocacy right now?
Well, I think, going back to what you're saying about the need to decouple this stuff, I think that what's changing after the forever war and all of that, and after, even though Camp Lejeune might still be under the radar and other contamination, I think that the change is actually going to come from the ranks of the military. And I see that in the questions that they were asking at that Navy press conference. One of the questions was, is this going to be noted in our file for VA claims? Because they know that they're probably, going to end up with some illness, or that one of their loved ones will, that they'll want to get a claim in on. That's not somebody who feels like their, quote, boss is taking care of them. The first thing they're doing is saying, you better put this in my file, So if I get cancer, I can get disability. That's a huge crack in that the idea that that the military is taking care of us, because their own people know now more and more every day, and that's why their recruiting is changing. So I think that a hopeful note, if there is such a thing in a story like this, it's that the people who are in the military are starting to understand that they are pawns in so many cases that are being, going back to World War II veterans who were, again, poisoned by mustard gas as experiments. And there's a long history of that. And that's kind of what this is. It's just a different version of it. The military being willing to use people regardless of their health. So I think that's a hopeful thing. As far as advocacy, I think that there needs to be, first and foremost, there needs to be real information being given to people, as opposed to what they're doing right now, which is flush your systems, turn on your hot water. Nothing about, like, how many people probably think that if they boil water, they can drink it, without realizing that if they're breathing that steam, that's going directly into their lungs.
Right.
Vapor intrusion is still an issue on Camp Lejeune because there's still underground plumes of contamination, and they're just kind of slowly moving around underneath the ground. And so there was a barracks last year that read too high for the air quality was so saturated that they had to shut it down.
Wow.
And that's from contamination from decades ago. So I think that first and foremost, there has to be real information. And if they think it's going to alarm people, good. It needs to alarm people. Shut it down and get people out of the housing, put them somewhere else. I don't care how much it costs. As you were just saying, we have the money.
Right.
Good Lord, if there's any budget that has it, it's the defense budget.
Right, and that's one thing that right now is being called for, Joe Biden to declare a state of emergency. That way,
Yes.
all of these funds could be designated to get people in safe areas, make sure, so that's an immediate thing that needs to happen, that everyone should be calling on the Biden administration to do. And of course, there's so many things that need to happen, like as part of that state of emergency in terms of cleanup and stuff like that. But as we talked about earlier, the biggest thing that needs to happen, and this has to be a catalyst for this site needs to be shut down. I mean, it absolutely has to be. I mean, there's no longer any, I mean, the warnings are, that time has passed. The crisis is here. We don't know how big of a disaster this already is and could become if there is not an immediate shutdown of the storage facility. But that's why we wanted to talk about this so urgently, because it's an emergency situation. This is a red alert at Red Hill. We don't know how big and devastating it's going to be. This could end up being another Camp Lejeune situation where the scale is that, hundreds of thousands of people have been ingesting these chemicals or will over the next several years. And then you will have another graveyard of infants on Hawaii. I mean, this is really what is happening now. And I think the advantage that we have in this moment is it's happening now and people can react to it now. And people who have been struggling in communities all across the country and in other countries around U.S. bases, I mean, they're fighting decades and decades after the poisoning had happened. This is happening now. We know it's happening now, and we can be holding the Navy's feet to the fire, the White House's feet to the fire to make sure that this story does not just exist in local media. And that's where it lives right now. I mean, I've been doing a lot of research on this case over the past couple days. I'm seeing a lot of stuff in local Hawaii media, and I'm not seeing much anywhere else. Of course, some elected officials from Hawaii, made impassioned speech in Congress and so forth. So it's gotten out there in the national in politics, but it's not a story yet, and it needs to be a story. And I think people just getting more information from you and listening to this and having it on their radar and trying to do what they can to push the issue, I think is extremely important.
I think that One issue with what you were talking about is the fact that we tend to think of Hawaii as a different, like, it's not to people in America. It's a vacation place where you go. They don't think of it as the same as they would think of Massachusetts or Iowa, and that needs to be kind of addressed as well, because that's part of us. That's America. And if this were happening in California, I think that the reaction in the national media would be different. And that's a sad commentary on things, but I think it's true. So I agree that it really needs to get immediate attention, because the Navy has to be forced to do the right thing, because they're not going to do it on their own. If I could do anything, I would put the gentleman who held the press conference in charge. And I would say he gets carte blanche on making all decisions. And I would get the Inspector General in there, because the Navy's, the Department of Defense's own Inspector General has written time and again about how they are not learning from the mistakes that they are making, and they are and pointing out what they keep doing wrong.
All power to Ernest Lau.
Yes, exactly.
And thank you for that. And just to wrap up, I mean, of course, it's important to focus on this very important local story of Red Hill. But just to zoom out for a moment, I mean, you are working on a book called Marine Life: How War Transformed America's Environment, from Farms and Fishing to Toxic Soil and Water, which is about this topic precisely. In your why this issue affects everyone, not just people living in Hawaii. In your research for your book, what have you found so far in terms of how big this problem really is? I mean, we know about Camp Lejeune. We now know a little about Red Hill, and more people will learn about it. But are there other potential Camp Lejeunes out there? Are there other possible Red Hills out there? How big is this issue of the military contaminating our water and soil? How big is it really?
I think that the problem is what we don't know. And again, that goes back to what's happening in Red Hill, where we have to depend on the Department of Defense to tell us what is happening. So basically, you're asking the people who are guilty of something to tell us what they've done. And that's a terrible situation to be in. So I think that raising awareness will hopefully make more and more people go out and find out what is going on. And this is not just on base anymore. With PFAS, it's contaminating local communities' water supply. So people have to really stop trusting their water. They need to say, I need to take charge of my safety, my family's safety, my community's safety, because I can't trust the government. So there's that, but there's also, in my book, I think we tend to forget how much war has transformed our way of life. There was such a huge upheaval for World War II, and the legacy of that. And, for instance, my family owned farms in Onslow County, and they were forced off the land by the government, and that land turned into Camp Lejeune, which is one of my kind of dark ironies in my own history. So, that happened across the country, and I think it's connected to how we have gotten, we've kind of been able to get disconnected from our food supply, our air, our water, everything, because we're to our own land anymore. And a big part of that is because of the military and war. So I'm trying to kind of tell the story in a way that makes it a very American story, not just what's happening now, but kind of all of the consequences of war. And the important thing for me is where do we go now?
That's where she kind of loses me in making this an American story, because it's definitely not an American story. And let me fix my echo. I hear a bunch of echoing. It's crazy. let's see what happens if I turn this off. Bear with me now. Check one. That's a little better. Such a delay. Okay. Now you can't hear me, right? Let me turn this up. Aloha to everyone in virtual world. I can't seem to get rid of this echo. Hello? Of this echo. I think he might be around here somewhere. Check one, check two. Check one, check two. Check three, check four. What do you know? Hello? How about now? I'm gonna end this early if it's gonna continue to echo, and it is so far. It's kind of funny. No comprende? Okay, guess who's over it? Thank you if you got some information from the beginning of the podcast. That's great. I have information in the post text. And this echo is making me talk funny. So, kukiai and aloha. I'm gonna stay on for a sec to test my audio. This is setup 1. Oh, sounds better already. Check. Yay, no echo. Oh my god. Okay. Whew. Just driving me nuts for a while. Check 1, check 2. Yay. We alive and we well. That's the main thing. So far, so good. I don't know about how long that'll last. So if I have these both on, there's an echo. So I'll keep them off. Yes. Another thing, though, is that this is not in real... Oh, there we go. Real time. Oh. We're fixing the sound. It's getting better. I can talk like a regular person now. Hallelujah. You know what? We can continue the podcast now. Oh. That was mind-numbing. Like, audio problems, you know. It's okay, I'll edit it for the future replay. Check. Checking on 1, checking on 2. Let's see if we go all the way, how loud I get. Check 3, check 4. Sounds the same, doesn't it? Maybe I'll go back. what's playing around here. If I turn this back on, am I back on air? Am I back on air, yo? Doesn't make a difference either, yeah. I'm still there if I'm not there. Okay. A few more seconds and we'll do a part 2. I'll get to edit this anyway. Edit this, edit that. Check, check. Okay. I'm not hearing nothing in the other. Oh, there it is. Are we good? We're great. Okay. What? Good or not? This is like ready or not. Here I come. You can't hide. Gonna find you. Uh-huh. That's what Lauryn Hill said. Cancel. Cancel, cancel, cancel. There's going to be a lot of feedback. This is the very first time I'm using Facebook audio. Well, I'm making it audio. I'm not waiting till it is audio. So this is take 2 for the players in the back, or whatever they say. What we got here? I want to read the Civil Beats article. Red Hill has changed the politics around the military in Hawaii. The military has enjoyed unwavering support from state and federal political leaders in Hawaii, but the threat to Oahu's water supply may be bringing that to an end. Washington, January 13, 2014 was supposed to be a wake-up call. On that day, a 27,000-gallon jet fuel leak from the Navy's World War II era underground storage facility at Red Hill threatened to contaminate Oahu's aquifer, which sits just 100 feet below the tanks. The initial reaction by state and local officials was swift. The Honolulu Board of Water Supply shut down its wells in the area and immediately started testing for petroleum. The state Senate created a special task force to investigate what went wrong. I'm happy with the sound at all, a little less. And by 2015, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and Hawaii Department of Health had entered into a binding agreement with the Navy to find a permanent solution to a problem then a generation in the making. That whole generation to get familiar with this problem. Now, nearly 8 years later, officials are reacting to a crisis they should have seen coming. Yet questions remain about whether they've done enough to prepare. Sometimes it takes a crisis to break a pattern, said Neil Milner, a professor emeritus of political science at the University of Hawaii. It should not be surprising that our politicians were willing to go along with business as usual until this crisis got out of hand. That's a fairly typical political response. Dozens of people have reported falling ill after drinking water, found to be contaminated with petroleum, believed to come from the Navy's underground fuel facility, and tens of thousands are without running water as a result of the wells in the area being shut down as a precaution. Hundreds of thousands. What the hell are you talking about? 400,000 is 400,000. It's 500,000. But here they are belittling it. Hawaii's leaders, from Governor David Ige to all 4 members of the state's congressional delegation, have taken forceful positions in recent days, demanding that the Navy suspend its operations at Red Hill until the pollution is under control. Whoa, you need some water. We're talking about water. Jump in the chat if you have any questions. Here, I'll invite you. I've been saying aloha, even though aloha is running short. to ask questions here. Feel free to ask questions here. I'm talking about the chat. And there you go, bang. That also goes to Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, like you know, and Clubhouse. So let me go see the chat online, and there it is. Read and reply to messages from multiple platforms. There's my message, and I'll type it out again. Aloha. Feel free to ask questions here. So it goes to YouTube and Twitter, hopefully. Oh, Twitter doesn't have a chat. But let's continue this article. Where were we? Hawaii's leaders, from Governor David Ige, I need more water, to all 4 members of the state's congressional delegation, have taken forceful positions in recent days, demanding that the Navy suspend its operations at Red Hill until the pollution is under control. Ige, in particular, has ordered the Navy to come up with a plan to drain its tanks of more than 100 million gallons of fuel, although he might not have that authority. Can you believe you don't have the authority to stop the pollution of your water supply? How can that be? These demands stand in stark contrast to earlier reactions concerning Red Hill, despite a long history of leakage. At this point, I think everybody is coalescing around the same message, said John Waihe'e, who did us nothing when he was in office. Now he's all Hawaiian, yeah? Who was Hawaii's governor from 1986 to 1994 and did nothing for us again. He pretended he was going to help the Hawaiian, but instead he moved into the Liliu Okalani's house that the state uses for the governor's office, and he could have not moved in there. And he could have done anything besides nothing for the Hawaiians. He says, at this point, it's clear that the status quo cannot continue to exist. Now he's all concerned. Better late than never, why he'e and why not he'e? Politicians in Hawaii have long walked a fine line between demanding the removal of the tanks and ensuring the facility operates safely. Red Hill, which was built in the 1940s, has become an important strategic asset in the Indo-Pacific region. We're the Indo-Pacific, did you hear that? We're an important strategic asset in the Indo-Pacific region. Fuck that. But its significance extends beyond national security. If they're so concerned about their national security, right, they would have made sure that the linings of these fucking tanks were secure. They would have fixed it a long fucking time ago if they were concerned about their national security. So if anybody's compromising their national fucking security, it's themselves. Let's be fucking clear about that. The military is the second largest driver of Hawaii's economy behind tourism. Doesn't mean they can't be replaced. And organizations such as the Hawaii Chamber of Commerce have lobbied hard against any proposals that might result in the military moving elsewhere. Fuck the Hawaii Chamber of Commerce. You heard me? Hawaii Chamber of Commerce? Fuck you. They've been trying to thread an impossible needle here for way too long, and it's been really frustrating. If that's what you call lying, willful negligence, no knowledgeable negligence, on purpose negligence, then whatever. But if you're just trying to belittle that fact, fuck you too, Marty Townsend. I don't know if I like that wording. Even though you're the head of the Sierra Club, what the fuck is wrong with telling the truth? Threading the needle? They've been polluting our water table permanently, not threading any needles. The fuck is wrong with you? This is an impossible situation because you can't have both the Red Hill fuel tanks where they are, as they are, and have clean water for 500,000 people. No shit. Townsend has been a long-time advocate of removing the aging fuel tanks at Red Hill, but some advocate is going to call it threading instead of what it is, pollution. Fuel tanks at Red Hill to protect the aquifer. But over the years, she and her allies have had little success getting by. Oh, they spelled by wrong. Oh, getting buy-in from the state's top elected officials, particularly those within the federal delegation. So it's our politicians who need to get my legs up their fucking ass, yeah? Like, you can't do your fucking job, and don't act like, oh, well, it's not my fault, I'm trying. Fuck you. Too often, She said politicians have focused on the billions of dollars the U.S. military brings into the islands each year. You know what you can be trying, politician? You'd be trying to take my fucking foot out your ass. Because you haven't been fucking doing your job if you've just been trying. You gotta do it. Not try. If your job was to try, you wouldn't have been elected to do the job. To do it. Too often, she said politicians have focused on the billions of dollars the U.S. military brings into the islands each year. Yep, they have. In fiscal year 2020, the Department of Defense reported spending $77 billion in the islands on personnel and contracts. How much of that money ends up in your and my pocket? I tell you how much ends up in my pocket. $0.00. So, are you just going to believe what they're saying? How much of that money ends up in your pocket? Think about it. Unless you're a military dependent, which you cannot help it at that point, but don't support the military because fuck you. If you're a military worker or military dependent, then you're getting that money in your pocket, but you're getting paid for your work there. You're not getting like money for free. You could do that job elsewhere if you needed to. So, not 1 billion or 2 billion or 3 billion or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 billion of the 7 billion ever came into my pocket. And for those of you who the money matters, you're a fucking whore. Our leaders want to keep the Navy in Hawaii, and from their perspective, anything that could risk the Navy leaving, such as the removal of the Red Hill fuel tanks, means the potential for economic disaster. They're more concerned about their economic disaster. If they were so concerned, they would have upkept this facility so it wouldn't be so expensive to move and it would work properly. But they're too busy, fucking their own selves up the ass and fucking giving themselves props that about the facility like it's a modern day marvel. Well, it's a modern day failure. That's what the fuck it is. It was never a marvel. It was always a failure from the beginning, and they were just stroking their fucking mental cock about it, having masturbation about how good they are, telling themselves how wonderful they are. But what do we care more about? The military's contribution to our economy, or the complete decimation of our economy because there's not enough water to drink? When they talk about that fucking contribution, I like you to think about how much of that fucking $7.7 billion you get in your pocket. What? Kanaka, you get $1 billion. You get $1 billion of that $7 billion. Any of you. Yeah, fuck that. Fuck that excuse. The Hawaii Chamber of Commerce created the Military Affairs Council, or MAC, in 1985 to advocate on behalf of the defense industry and help local businesses take advantage of the flood of federal dollars flowing into the islands. What do you think about all this bullshit? Nothing? You're mindless? It doesn't bother you or your water? You have no opinion? Well, if you have a question, type it in the chat section, because I can more likely than for sure answer your question. Yeah, I don't have anything yet, so we're good. So you guys know it all then, huh? Right on. I don't need to explain nothing to you. Right on. I'm gonna play some music, and we're gonna come back to this bullshit, right? Right. And here we go. I don't know about you guys, but I don't hear nothing. Although the sound says it's going through. Oh, there it is. Oh, I know what's wrong.
Nibi,
Navy,
Wabo,
Wabo,
Endian,
and Iron.
Water is the lifeblood of our mother, the earth. Water is the lifeblood of our own body.
To continue to pass on the knowledge that needs to be given unto the other generations. You are the keeper of the water.
To make the change in this life condition that we're in, that great-grandchildren will stand up to this truth of what life is about and to live it in such an honorable way, the way ancestors came to this earth.
Each day when the sun rises, no matter how bad the day before might have been, there's a new chance for your hopes and dreams.
Check one, check two.
And I say, Chimiigwech, thank you for
Check
singing
one, check
the
two.
water song.
Nibi wabo endayen aki misqui nibi wabo heya 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 hey heya 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 ho.
With thanks to the elders, grandmothers, grandfathers, sing the water song. It's entitled. Mac Armstrong's The Water Protector. If you want to know how to help or you want to learn some more, click the link in my description in my post text. There's only so much instrumental I can take, so let's just cut that off. Good job, Mr. Armstrong. We're going to go back to Red Alert at Red Hill, Navy disaster, poison, Hawaii. Thank you for joining us.
So much to explore, and I cannot wait for your book. We hope to do an interview with you, sit-down interview, come to where you are for the film, which would be really incredible. How can people find...
I'll give you some southern food.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would love to. How can people find out more about your work? How can people support your projects best?
I'm very active on Twitter. I'm actually someone who actually loves that website, as frustrating as it can be. I've made a lot of connections there, and I've learned a lot from people there. So that's certainly always somewhere that you can find my work. I don't have kind of an author website yet. That's a work in progress. But so I have a Facebook page as well, and I also maintain the Camp Lejeune Community Assistance Panel Facebook page, and that's a good place to learn more about Camp Lejeune. There's also a documentary I'd like to mention about Camp Lejeune that I think is informative in a way that will help people understand the current issues, and that's it's called Semper Fi, Always Faithful, and it's about the drill instructor who kind of took on the entire military-industrial complex, basically, and he's the only reason that we have what we have as far as information, because they have no transparency. So I think that it's important for people to understand that it took one of their own going against them and saying, if you're not going to live up to your motto, I'm going to live up to it. So that documentary is available, and I would encourage everyone to watch it. And my mother is actually in that documentary talking about the baby she lost, and before, of course, she knew that she herself was going to die of leukemia. So that's a good way to get an idea of how hard this fight is going to be. I think people will have a better sense of it if they watch that documentary.
Right, and I agree with you that a rebellion from within the ranks of the military is definitely an important and crucial component of this broader struggle about military pollution. And, I think if anyone is listening who is in the active duty or reserves or National Guard, I mean, the whole history should tell you this, but just this one case alone at Red Hill shows you that the people that you trust with your lives, that you're supposed to believe are telling you the right thing when they tell you to go to this or that country and risk your life, that they don't have much regard for your life at all, and they will literally poison you and your family and just try to cover it up and actually deny you benefits once you get out.
Right.
But
importantly, sorry, just to add to that, it's not just that they are willing to do it, but it's not necessary. It's not necessary for them to do it in order to, quote, keep us safe.
Right.
So they could be absolutely doing exactly what they need to do as far as goals of keeping us safe without poisoning people, right, active duty, and their families.
Right.
It's not, you don't have to be a casualty of war when you're not in a war.
Right.
And that's
it's just
what everyone
pure.
is.
It's just pure disregard for human life. No ethics, no morals, and that's who is in charge at the Pentagon and down through the upper ranks of the Navy command and the other branches. All just as bad. Lori, we thank you so much for joining us. If you want to follow Lori on Twitter, as she mentioned, she is at Lou Freshwater. That is at LOU Freshwater. And Lori, we hope to talk to you again very soon at Empire Files.
Thank you so much for having me and for all the work you do. And I look forward to working with you to hopefully keep people safe.
I don't think we need the spooky music embellishment, but it's spooky enough without the music. So just to reset, this is Kamahana here, and aloha to you for taking your time to listen to this, especially in between the setup, because this is my first time broadcasting to Facebook, so kalamai. But I think I got it down, but we'll see when it turns out. The purpose of this is to educate, and for the educated to teach those who want to learn. And then when you've all learned, because we have no time, it's kind of there's a need to be a rush to this. When you've all learned to take action, maybe peaceful protest, maybe you can afford to take the Navy to court. Maybe you're an organization and you have that kind of access to funds that can sue the military and hold them accountable. And if that all doesn't work, maybe you're willing to do what it's going to take to compel the military and our state legislatures to do their fucking job. And that might take, I don't know, blocking the freeway. That might take, I don't know, closing down the airport. Yeah, that might take people with balls and courage. And I know there are some of you out there, and those of you who cannot, people need to eat, people need rides, people need funds, people need people out there writing about it, people need people out there podcasting about it, people need people out there TikToking about it, people need prayers, so you can do something. It's not like you're fucking retarded and cannot. Pick something to do and not act stupid. There's something to do. You don't have to be Hawaiian to need to drink water. So you can get off of your fat asses too and do something. Don't you think? Or do you not think? Is that the problem? Because I see some people and they're taking action. I see people working night and day taking action, and it's the same few people who are always doing all the work. And shame on the rest of you. And it's not my fault that you feel shame. I'm just letting you know I'm the messenger. If you can't stand the messenger, then the message must be true. Okay, we're moving on to... this is a great... what I'm about to play is a great summary of the situation. It's from Empire Files. As pop as that sounds, that's it, pop. They really have a good way of referencing solid sources. Like you'll hear the audio from the Board of Water Supply, you'll hear the audio from the military, you hear the audio of everything she's talking about. She's backing up. There's a couple things she gets wrong. I think she says statehood, which you have to really have an annexation, which means you really have to have a treaty to be a real state. So we're a de facto state. That's an incorrect way to, that's a misrepresentation of the truth. And that's not like a debatable thing. There's facts, things that make a thing a state, include a treaty, include a conveyance of metes and bounds, include the will of the people and the consent of the people. Fact. So Empire Files podcasts, no, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the summary. This is a 12-minute summary. Oh, 9-minute. Enjoy.
Taste like gasoline, and people began showing.
I'll start it from the beginning, sorry.
The U.S. Navy has just poisoned thousands of people in Hawaii with deadly chemicals in their drinking water, and instead of acting to save lives, they're engaging in a massive cover-up. This ongoing disaster is the result of the Navy recklessly storing millions of gallons of fuel literally 100 feet from Oahu's largest drinking water source. This story should be treated as the national scandal it is, but so far it's been largely absent across major media, maybe because the culprit is the beloved U.S. military. Before we get into it, watch the man who's been sounding the alarm for years. Hawaii Board of Water Supply Chief Engineer Ernest Lau at a press conference on December 3rd, right after he was forced to shut down the island's essential aquifer.
I think this is a foreshadowing of what could happen to the broader community if we don't do something about the storage of this fuel, over 180 million gallons of diesel and jet fuel, 100 feet above our drinking water aquifer. If we don't do something about eliminating that risk to the water resource. So I think it's time for action now. It is time. We cannot wait any longer. The water resources is precious. It's irreplaceable. It's pure. There is no substitute for pure water, and our lives depend upon it. So I would urge the decision makers and the Navy to take action immediately, to take away this risk from our vital water resources there.
You know, I can't even imagine what was going through Lau's head at that moment, knowing that despite how quickly this current leak is cleaned up, there are already untold amounts of people who could suffer and potentially die from the toxins they've already ingested. Petrochemicals in drinking water are notorious for causing leukemia, miscarriages, and devastating birth defects. We just did an hour-long podcast on this unfolding tragedy, in which you can find many more details about the case linked to in the description below. So, this is all happening at the Red Hill Fuel Storage Facility, owned and operated by the Navy, where since World War II, about 200 million gallons of fuel have been stored in the same rusted-through metal tanks, right on top of this precious and irreplaceable water source. Red Hill has always leaked. A classified Navy report in 1982 reported leaks in the fuel lines, and regular leaks for 40 years prior. Since then, the Navy's own data has shown constant, regular fuel leakage and consistent toxins in the soil that far exceed Department of Health safety standards. We're talking about almost 80 years of this pollution. 80 years. Once residents became aware of the once top-secret facility in the 90s, they've been calling to shut it down. Because obviously, it's insane to continue this. But the Navy's always maintained there's nothing to worry about. Insane. They test the water all the time. If there was a problem, well, they'd be sure to let you know. Here's a Navy captain in 2016 responding to all the concerns.
Good morning to you, County Ron. Good to be here. Top two questions people are asking. Number one, is our drinking water safe? And number two, will it continue to be safe? Yes, Ron. So easy questions to answer. One, the drinking water is safe, and I know that because we test the drinking water exhaustively once every quarter, and we also have ground monitoring wells near Red Hill, which we test on a monthly basis, so we would know if there was any petroleum in the water, the drinking water is safe. Okay.
It turns out that the Navy detected harmful petrochemicals in the drinking water at least 6 months ago. According to Hawaii paper The Star Advertiser,
6 months.
Water samples taken by the Navy at its Red Hill drinking water well showed petroleum contamination in July, August, and September. Some of the samples exceeded the state's threshold for what's considered safe. So what did the Navy do when they found these chemicals back in July? Did they tell residents, pregnant women, even their own troops to stop drinking the water? No. Instead, they actively hid the information and refused to comply with the Hawaii Department of Health on giving them the data. The Navy had been constantly failing health inspections at the facility, leading to hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines from the health department, as well as a lawsuit filed by the Sierra Club in November. The only reason the Navy finally admitted something was even happening is that the water began to smell and taste like gasoline, and people began showing up at the emergency room with chemical burns in their mouths.
Today, Amanda just texted me, and it's about 6 o'clock in the morning Hawaii time, Mr. Chairman, that she went to the Tripler emergency room last night because of a headache and irritation in her mouth and throat, and her doctor diagnosed her with chemical burns in her mouth.
The Navy's response to all of this has been predictable. Cover their own asses by any means necessary. Watch this Navy spokesperson lie to the public.
Well, what I would say to that is if you're pregnant, you're concerned, one, obviously drink water that you feel is safe. No evidence to suggest that there's any long-term effects, but
It is completely false that there are no long-term side effects of pregnant women drinking these pollutants. Navy Command cannot be trusted. Even head of the Hawaii Sierra Club chapter, Wayne Tanaka, stated in November, "We have lost all trust in the local Navy Command." And that was before we knew they'd been covering up poisonous water. We have no idea how many people have been impacted so far, how big this leak is, or how much more pollution is still making its way from Red Hill to the drinking water supply. What we do know is that Biden must declare a state of emergency to help this community, and that the Navy must finally do what Hawaiians have been demanding for decades. Shut down Red Hill. It's not like they don't have the money to do what's urgently needed. Move the fuel tanks. Relocate the residents. And pay for remediation,
We'll
cleanup,
rewind that.
and
Can we
lifetime
stop for a
health care.
second? I don't know why.
It's not like they don't have the money to do what's urgently needed. Move the fuel tanks, relocate the residents, and pay for remediation, cleanup, and lifetime health care for all potential victims. Right now, the Navy's refusing to do any of that, and they're actually saying they need 5 months to fix the leak, and until 2045 to make it totally safe. No matter what happens with this current contamination, this same thing is guaranteed to happen again and again, as long as this totally pointless, decaying facility remains there. We know from the military's horrific legacy of water contamination, from Camp Lejeune to Coldwater Creek, that the standard response is to cover up their pollution as long as possible. And once people start dying and they can't hide it anymore, deny responsibility and health claims by the people they have poisoned. This has happened to so many communities in the U.S. and around the world living near current and former U.S. bases. We cannot let it happen again at Red Hill. As Laos said, water is life. Water is the most sacred substance on earth that sustains all life. How can we trust a government that intentionally dumps its toxic waste into this precious resource? How can we believe an entity that has done nothing but lie and cover up its criminal actions, proving time and again it values money over human life?
They shit where they eat.
It's important to remember that Hawaii was just another colonial military outpost of the empire, which was denied statehood
We were
rights
never a
until
colony,
1959.
so we couldn't be
Today,
colonial.
22% of Oahu's land is occupied by the U.S. military, with even more land remnants of former military installations. We can see that colonial relationship continue to play out in the Red Hill crisis. Hawaii's own Department of Health, Board of Water Supply, and elected officials are totally at the mercy of the local Navy Command. If this is what the military leaders are doing to not only its own citizens, but its own service members, just imagine what it's doing to the people who live near U.S. bases abroad, where the military isn't subject to any regulations or EPA oversight. How many more places are being poisoned? How many more Red Hills are there?
We don't need the extra embellished spooky music. It's scary enough. Let's revisit what she said, right? Okay, check it out. Many of the components in jet fuel is undetectable by the human nose and tongue and eyes and senses. You could be consuming jet fuel components right now that are detrimental to your health and can cause death, leukemia, and all kinds of other ways to die from components in jet fuel that you cannot taste. You cannot taste some of this. Now, just because they can smell the gasoline doesn't mean that that's what it is. They could have been drinking components of jet fuel a long time before they smelt it, because that is not only a thing, it's happened before. The military, the Navy, the same Navy that poisoned our aquifer, has also poisoned an aquifer in its own contiguous states before. They acted the same exact way, pretended like it wasn't happening, then only admitted it when they had to. Does that sound familiar? Then gaslighted everybody, told people the water was okay to drink, allowed them to continue to drink the poison water, so that there are a graveyard of babies for this town that this exact thing happened to, that is attributed to the military's spoiling of their water table with jet fuel. So if you think you get time for wait, and you get time for cruise on the fence, fuck you. You get off the fucking fence right now, and you do what you're supposed to do. Write to your legislature, go out there and protest, create content. Create podcasts, create TikToks, create YouTubes, create fucking OnlyFans if that's what the fuck you do. We got the Howleys telling us that the Howleys cannot be trusted. We got the Howleys telling us the Howleys left them high and dry, caused them leukemia and sickness that killed their parents, killed their unborn children, gave them lifetime diseases from what? Jet fuel leaking into their water system. Sit with that for a while. Just sit with it. Jet fuel leaking into your water system? Exactly. A portion of this poison water, you cannot detect it or smell it, and it's tasteless. So people could be consuming it right now as the Navy drags their ass, as you sit on the fence, as our legislatures play big dick with whoever they're playing with. People could be consuming jet fuel material, unable to smell and taste it right now. And they're dragging their asses. And let's face it, most of you are dragging your asses too. What are you waiting for? An invitation to impress upon your representatives? To get that fucking gasoline out right now, not yesterday, but the week before, more like the decade before. Well, I'm gonna change the energy up because most of you in Hawaii suck ass. You need to get off your fucking fat asses and contribute to the change that we need, to the vocal urgency, to the urgency we need to beg our government representatives to act in. Not in words, but to take action. We need the water table to stop being polluted. We need to cut off the source of that pollution ASAP. We need to test all the water all around Oahu, because our water system is like one cup with multiple straws in it that are called aquifers. You understand? That's a fact. 1 gallon of jet fuel pollutes 1 million gallons of water permanently and irreversibly. You understand what permanently and irreversibly means? They cannot clean it out. They cannot filter it. That's what it is. So live with your mentality in the right place, called the present, and what it is. I want to listen to George Helm and what the hell the fuck he said to do. and how the fuck he said to act, and what the fuck he said you guys are missing. You're going to listen to him say that the Hawaiians is hopeless, but he going to give them hope. And how he going to give them hope? By giving them integrity and we'll let him tell you. Kaho'olawe Aloha Aina George Helm. Produced by Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana in 1977. That's George Helm singing. He wasn't just an activist, and he's singing them right. He would learn how to sing Hawaiian music. He never just make up any kind. So we're listening to George Helm. Why? Why, you wonder? Well, they went up directly against the military, demanded Kaho'olawe back, put their bodies in the way of the bombs and the Aina. And guess what? They won. Yeah, let's talk about that. I hear you guys always talking about how we cannot win and how we no can do this and how embarrassing it is or how aggressive that seems or how scared you are, pussies. Grow some balls. You think they wasn't scared when they went to Kaho'olawe and stood underneath the bombs? And they won. They beat the military. They kicked their asses out of Kaho'olawe.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is George.
And they got what they wanted and demanded.
The homestead site.
They won in court.
To get an education, instead I lost my innocence.
Okay, George Helm is talking, so let's go back. I'm rewinding it.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is George Helm Jr. I was born and raised in Kalamula, the homestead site. I went to Honolulu to get an education, instead I lost my innocence.
He said he went to Honolulu to get his education. Instead, he lost his innocence. Right after he played Hawaiian Cowboy.
Kohi Malama Lama o Kanaloa, Aloha Aina Ohana, was formed through the concern for the future of the Hawaiian people. George Helm and other concerned individuals on January 4th, 1976, committed themselves by landing on the island of Kaho'olawe to show the serious concern towards the problems and issues that will affect the culture and lifestyle of the Hawaiian people. His music was a way for him to communicate to people. It became a tool to educate and make aware of the serious problems Hawaiian people face in today's established society.
You heard what he said. He said he used his music to reach the heart of the people. His music. So he wasn't a recording artist. However, his live recordings of his live performances have been captured and made into an album. And it's called George Helm, A True Hawaiian. and it's filled with real Hawaiian songs, real Hawaiian way he sings it and strums it and plays it, and he doesn't take any liberty. He's very disciplined. You know why? Because he went to learn how to play Hawaiian music. You don't just wake up and copycat, because guess what? You're not doing the Hawaiian style. You're not. I can tell you right now, it's bullshit style. You go learn from the people that you got to learn from, and I know because I did. But he did it the right way too. He kept asking his mentor and begging his mentor that wasn't his mentor yet to please teach me how to play Hawaiian music. Please teach me how to play Hawaiian music. And he kept saying no. He kept saying no. So he decided to go do his yard when he's not home and fix up around his house. And he kept doing that until he was finally accepted as a student to learn the music the right way. That's how important it should be to everyone, and it's not. That's just a note. Let's listen to some George Helm. The album came up after he died. It's called George Helm, The Music of George Helm, A True Hawaiian. I love the title, because if there are true Hawaiians, what does that suggest? Exactly. Kalamaula, George Helm. Upstanding example of a Hawaiian, a true Hawaiian. That's Kalamaula by George Helm. He wasn't just an activist. This is him singing. I'm exampling him right now during the time with Red Hill and the need to confront the military because he confronted the military. He had balls. He never had excuses. And he did them right when he had to do them. He never waited till after. He did them as soon as it was happening. And most importantly, he won. So take that and eat it. To all your excuses, to all your fear, to all your cowardice. That's all that is. Grow some balls. Ever thought of that? That was Kalamaula on the island of Molokai. That's that song. An oldie but goodie. I'm going to listen to one more and we'll get back to the podcast because we got to recognize that we've come against the military before, confronted them, demanded of them, beat them, kicked their ass off on the island, and won. Not so that we can act like pussies now. George never died because of that. So we can act like pussies. That's from his live performances at his album, which is awesome because he never recorded before, you know. And we didn't get his album till about beginning of the 90s, way after he died. And I'm showing him because what balls this guy had that most of you out there don't have. and confronted, demanded of, and beat the military. You understand? You people that saying cannot, of course cannot. Not if you have that kind of pussy ass attitude. Nobody can do nothing. You're not going to do nothing if you're saying you cannot. Let's see what else SoundCloud has as far as possible podcasts regarding Red Hill. I like the audio stuff because then I can show it to you, yeah? Red Hill. Oh, I know. Let's go to my YouTube and let's go through that playlist of Red Hill emergency in Hawaii, Navy poisons drinking water. That's the kind of notices we have right now that's not being publicized, it's being downplayed. But just in case you forgot, let me just remind you of how we summarize this one more time, because you cannot get enough of this.
The U.S. Navy has just poisoned thousands of people in Hawaii with deadly chemicals in their drinking water.
Why is it so loud?
And instead of acting to save lives, they're engaging in a massive cover-up. This ongoing disaster is the result of the Navy recklessly storing millions of gallons of fuel, literally 100 feet from Oahu's largest drinking water source. This story should be treated as the national scandal it is, but so far it's been largely absent across major media, maybe because the culprit is the beloved U.S. military. Before we get into it, watch the man who's been sounding the alarm for years, Hawaii Board of Water Supply Chief Engineer Ernest Lau, at a press conference on December 3rd, right after he was forced to shut down the island's essential aquifer.
I think this is a foreshadowing of what could happen to the broader community if we don't do something about the storage of this of fuel, over 180 million gallons of diesel and jet fuel, 100 feet above our drinking water aquifer. If we don't do something about eliminating that risk to the water resource, so I think it's time for action now. It is time. We cannot wait any longer. The water resources is precious. It's irreplaceable. It's pure. There is no substitute for pure water, and our lives depend upon it. So I would urge the decision makers and the Navy to take action immediately to take away this risk from our vital water resources there.
I hope everybody's listening very carefully, very, very carefully, because they're telling us all the information we need to know. Now let's listen to a former victim of jet fuel poisoning in her water. Or shall we listen to... Let me think about this. Here we go. Check this out.
They've had this from World War II, the Red Hill fuel storage facility. About 200 million gallons of fuel is sitting there under a mountain in rusted tanks right over the aquifer. So right over the drinking water is where they had these fuel tanks. Each of those tanks are about 18 stories high, 13 million gallons of fuel apiece they hold. And again, only 100 feet separates the top of the water table, the drinking water source, and these fuel storage tanks. The Navy's own studies show that this has been leaking fuel into the ground basically since the facility's beginnings.
And Pearl Harbor. It's been leaking into Pearl Harbor.
Into Pearl Harbor.
Yes,
yeah.
And on Pearl Harbor Day, you know.
Yeah, today is Pearl Harbor Day. That's a great. Today is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. I should have led with that.
Things like we'd honor.
let me set this up first, okay? So this is Status Coop News, and the host, Jordan, speaks with Lori Freshwater, a survivor of the Camp Lejeune water contamination disaster in North Carolina, about the unfolding water crisis in Hawaii due to the Navy's Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility, which lies only 100 feet above the groundwater system. The fuel storage facility has been leaking fuel for decades. Decades. You're listening to this? Which the Navy knew about. You're listening, right? But claimed wasn't a concern because their monitoring showed the leaks hadn't contaminated the drinking water. You can grab samples of drinking water from wherever and then falsify that. That's not an indicator of whether or not the lens was polluted. So I'll start this over again. Let's take a good listen to these. These are Howleys telling us about their Howley army and how they are. I don't know about you, but you believe people when they tell you about themselves the first time.
They've had this from World War II, the Red Hill fuel storage facility, about 200 million gallons of fuel sitting there under a mountain in rusted tanks right over the aquifer. So right over the drinking water is where they had these fuel tanks. Each of those tanks are about 18 stories high.
I just want to remind you to ask questions in the comment section. Whether you're watching from YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, just go ahead and put your questions or comments in the comment section of the post with the live. And Facebook, I don't get a notice from Facebook though, but do put your comment in there and I'll be looking. I'll be trying to check on it, but just know I don't get a notice, so I won't get like a bling bling or nothing. I have to look, so I am going to look. And aloha to you. Enjoy the education.
13 million gallons of fuel apiece they hold. And again, only 100 feet separates the top of the water table, the drinking water source, and these fuel storage tanks. The Navy's own studies show that this has been leaking fuel into the ground basically since the facility's beginnings.
In Pearl Harbor. It's been leaking into Pearl Harbor.
Into Pearl Harbor.
Yes,
Yeah.
and on Pearl Harbor Day,
Yeah, today is Pearl Harbor Day. That's a great. Today is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. I should have led with
so
that.
it seems like we'd honor the veterans that lost their lives and the people that were, fought in the war. It seems like we'd honor them instead of just having ceremonies that we wouldn't maybe pour fuel into the Pearl Harbor,
And I also want to bring up, because the Navy has basically acknowledged that there's high levels of petroleum, lead, oil that they have found leaking. But they always said, but we have groundwater monitoring. So we have wells that do groundwater monitoring. So although these levels are very high, again, oil, petroleum, diesel fuel, that they're above, quote, the allowable limits, which in my view is a joke, why we even have allowable limits. There should be no diesel fuel in your water anywhere. But they always said our monitoring doesn't show that it's in the drinking water. Well, people in Hawaii, we're finding out now, have been having similar symptoms for on the stories I've covered. They could say what they want, maybe, but how do we know that their testing was completely accurate, that they were completely transparent about what was in the water? And
that's hilarious.
Monitoring doesn't show that it's in the drinking water. Well, people in Hawaii, we're finding out now, have been having similar symptoms for decades. So it seems to me, based on the stories I've covered, they could say what they want, maybe, but how do we know that their testing was completely accurate, that they were completely transparent about what was in the water? And you don't know what's in that water until people start smelling it, or it's if there's too much of a leak, there's too much toxins for them to cover. So, question: For all we know, this has been leaking and making people sick for God knows how long.
Right. And, importantly, what you're talking about with the levels, that's another trick that they use. And that's what's happening with PFAS. They're able to say in one state the level is this, in another state the level is this. So instead of having the precautionary principle like Europe has, we go state by state to decide what limits of these chemicals are allowed. And actually, when I was talking to Abby, I kind of misspoke about one thing. I said, well, the level of benzene is supposed to be 0. And then I kind of went, I should have double checked that. And I went back, and the allowable limit is 5. It's the goal to have 0. And I was just like you're saying, the goal? No, you should have no benzene in the water, so.
And that's also, I want to stress that, because they say, for example,
Let's just sit with that for a little while. I'll just pause it for a bit. You should have no benzene in the water. There's not a healthy amount of jet fuel you can drink, or not a minimum amount. It should be 0. They're going to try to nickel and dime you into believing that there's a minimum amount you can drink. Are you going to be a fool and believe that? Are you going to entertain that argument? Are you going to tolerate that kind of rhetoric? Are you going to do nothing?
Like you're saying, the goal? No, you should have no benzene in the water, so.
And that's also, I want to stress that, because they say, for example, the allowable limit of lead in drinking water is 15 parts per billion. But that's not actually a public health measurement. That's a corrosion measurement. So a lot of these, like the EPA, whatever they come up with for the allowable level of XYZ, you always got to look underneath the hood, because really every person's different. So maybe if I was exposed to, 2% benzene, I don't know, maybe I'd be okay. But another person with immune problems or whatever else, it would destroy their system, even with that allowable limit. So it's pretty insane that they even have a measurement for what's an allowable limit of diesel fuel or jet fuel in your water.
Right, and and it might affect someone who has immune problems. If there's acute poisoning like is happening in Red Hill, but you can be perfectly healthy, and it's just some genetic thing and some luck of the draw means that is going to get your cell and damage your bone marrow. You can be the healthiest person in the world, and you're just the person that is going to give leukemia to, and that's one of, I think, the most alarming thing, the urgent thing in Hawaii right now is because the Navy let the water get to the point where people are getting acute poisoning, which is terrifying. And by having that level, they can taste and smell the fuel, and they're actually posting pictures on the Joint Base Facebook page of them using a lighter to spark the top of the water. Because that's happening, now the Navy is saying, when people ask at these town halls, mothers, asking, well, can I bathe my child? And they're saying, well, you're your own best censor. Some people are more sensitive than others. So just be your judge. Talk to your doctor. They're using all these things and telling people to use their best judgment about whether to bathe their child in hot bath water where the vapor, the steam, will poison the children. Right. So they let it get to the worst point, and now they're using that worst point to buy themselves time to cover up what they've done and to try and figure out how to keep that fuel in those tanks.
Right.
Because that's their goal.
Right. And by the way, I mean, the other element of this is in Camp Lejeune.
Let's pause it right there. I want to go back. I want to hear that again. I want to internalize that. This is a former victim. Not former. This is also a victim of jet fuel poisoning to her water system, to her whole town's water system. Her mother died of a strange leukemia. She has symptoms. They won their case against the Navy, but they're living with death, and because of the exact same kind of pollution. I want to be clear, because people seem to be walking around like, oh, we got time. It's not that bad yet. We need to get their fucking asses in gear, get off their fat asses, and contribute to the change that needs to happen. Instead of fucking digging their noses and criticizing everybody.
It was surrounding.
Rewinding.
Of this is in Camp
We'll hear that
Lejeune.
again.
Censor. Some people is going to give leukemia to, and
Or whatever else, it would destroy their system, even with that allowable limit. So it's pretty insane.
We'll break right there and we'll start it. I could give a crap. Like, we're just here to circulate truth and facts, get people interested to at least for their own knowledge, and maybe even taking action. And if they're not taking action, then fuck them, because everybody should be taking action. Here we
They
go.
even have a measurement for what's an allowable limit of diesel fuel or jet fuel in your water.
right, and and it might affect someone who has immune problems. If there's acute poisoning like is happening in Red Hill, but you can be perfectly healthy, and it's just some genetic thing and some luck of the draw means that is going to get your cell and damage your bone marrow. I mean, you can be the healthiest person in the world, and you're just the person that is going to give leukemia to. And that's one of, I think, the most alarming thing. The urgent thing in Hawaii right now is because the Navy let the water get to the point where people are getting acute poisoning, which is terrifying. And by that, having that level, they can taste and smell the fuel, and they're actually posting pictures on the Joint Base Facebook page of them using a lighter to spark the top of the water. Because that's happening, now the Navy is saying, when people ask at these town halls, mothers, asking, well, can I bathe my child? And they're saying, well, you're your own best censor. Some people are more sensitive than others. So just be your judge. Talk to your doctor. They're using all these things and telling people to use their best judgment about whether to bathe their child in hot bath water, where the vapor, the steam, will poison the children. Right. So they let it get to the worst point, and now they're using that worst point to buy themselves time to cover up what they've done and to try and figure out how to keep that fuel in those tanks.
Right.
Because that's the goal.
Right. And by the way, I mean, the other element of this is in Camp Lejeune, it was surrounding people that got made sick, as well as the military on the Marine Corps base. Here, it's also people in the Navy that have been poisoned. It's also, in addition to the surrounding communities around Pearl Harbor. So the United States, in this case the Navy, in Camp Lejeune's case the Marine Corps, they've been apparently knowingly poisoning their own service members. In America, we just fetishize the military. It's like, cannot criticize, cannot cut the military budget. Veterans Day, thank you for your service. And, I think for the actual soldiers, I do thank them. But the United States Navy, Marine Corps, and God knows how many, the Army, they've been essentially knowingly allowing leaks and poisoning of active duty and veterans. So what does that really say about this, narrative of, we hold sacred our service members.
It says it's bullshit. It's crap. It's and the thing is that it's not necessary. They can do what they need to do in their, let's just say whatever, whether you agree with their goals or not, and a lot of people don't. But they can meet their goals without poisoning people. They just have to spend more money and they have to do things that they don't want to do. So it's not only poisoning active duty service members and their families, it's doing it unnecessarily. They've spent billions of dollars on, half a bomb, you know what I mean? And then they say, this is not cost effective when it comes to putting a lab on the island where they're keeping those tanks above the water source. So they had to ship their samples to the mainland and they were damaged. Guess what? We had a lot of damaged samples in Camp Lejeune too. So it's certainly odd, and you hear there was a wife at one of the town halls and she was saying, my husband's on a submarine. I can't talk to him and he's on a submarine under the water. And he thinks that myself and my child are being taken care of by the Navy. And we're not. And they really had no answer for her, and they never have an answer. Because a lot of people on active duty have this kind of feeling like that's what they signed up for. We signed up to put ourselves at risk. But people have to realize it's not just active duty, it's their families too. In addition to in Red Hill, the rest of this island who are at great risk. And I think one thing I see changing is I see more and more active duty service people and family members who are not afraid to criticize the leadership, not afraid to say you're doing this, criminally. So that's at least one positive thing, is that people are getting to know the truth, which is the sad truth that they cannot trust the Department of Defense of the United States to keep them safe.
U.S. military families stationed in Hawaii and others working in and around the base there are dealing with tap water contaminated with petroleum. The cause is unknown, but investigators say a leak from a nearby fuel storage facility operated by the Navy may be to blame. On Monday, Secretary of the Navy Carlos Del Toro issued an apology, but as Stephanie Sy reports, there were warning signs.
For days, active duty soldiers at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam in Hawaii have been distributing water to their own. Thousands of military families without clean drinking water due to fuel contamination.
I am a single active duty mom to 2 special needs kids.
At several town halls in the last week, resident after resident reported harrowing medical problems in their children.
On Sunday, my children took a bath, and for 45 minutes afterwards, they complained of burning skin.
And in their pets.
When we made the heartbreaking choice to put my beloved dog down after a mysterious illness.
The Navy-run water system serves some 93,000 people. About 1,000 households reported smelling fuel in the water starting in late November. It took the Navy almost a week to acknowledge the problem. Residents like Audrey LaMagna had been smelling the fuel for days.
I decided, let me just fill up a cup, like a plastic cup full of water. And what do you know, the cup smelled like fuel.
LaMagna, a military spouse, has a baby and a 7-year-old.
What went through your mind when you tested the water and you realized you had been bathing your children in it and that there was signs of fuel in it?
I'm poisoning them and I didn't even know. Like, how sad is that?
The contamination was found in the Navy-run Red Hill well, which sits close to an underground fuel storage facility built during World War II. The facilities had a history of leaks dating back to 1949, with 27,000 gallons of jet fuel accidentally released in 2014. Just 2 months ago, Hawaii's Department of Health fined the Navy $325,000 for violations at the facility, including failure to maintain corrosion protection of the metal tanks. The 20 tanks have the capacity to hold 250 million gallons of fuel, and they sit above the island's most important aquifer, which supplies groundwater to 20% of Honolulu residents. As a precaution, civilian water authorities shut down a shaft near Red Hill that serves customers in Honolulu. Governor David Ige issued an emergency order requesting the Navy come up with a plan to empty the fuel tanks, but it's unclear he has any enforcement authority. Navy Secretary Carlos Del Toro apologized on Monday during a visit to the base and announced operations were suspended at Red Hill.
As long as I'm Secretary of the Navy, I pledge to you that we will address all the issues that you just mentioned with sincerity, transparency, with a complete dedication to try to fix this problem.
For now, many families are finding alternate housing, including Audrey LaMagnus. They've moved to a hotel, which the Navy says they'll pay for later.
Does that work for you?
No, it does not, because we live paycheck to paycheck. We're on a single income.
The Navy says it is flushing clean water through its system, which can take up to 10 days.
Even if they were to give us the all clear, quite frankly, I don't trust what the Navy has to say anymore.
Joining me now to discuss the wider implications of the water contamination is the manager and chief engineer of Honolulu's Water Supply Board, Ernest Lau. Mr. Lau, aloha, and thank you for joining the News Hour. When did the Navy notify you about the contamination at the Red Hill shaft, and what was your reaction?
Stephanie, actually, the Navy did not notify us about the drinking water contamination. Our State Department of Health notified us on Sunday evening. That was the Sunday after Thanksgiving. But we actually got no official notification from the Navy.
You shut down the Halawa shaft, which serves 20% of Honolulu's water customers. Why did you do that? Did you find contamination in water in that well?
Just to be clear, Stephanie, we have not found contamination by fuel in our drinking water in Halawa shaft. Halawa shaft represents 20% of our supply capacity. So we took that precaution of shutting it down because we saw what was happening to the Navy. From their drinking water source at Red Hill shaft, they actually ended up pumping fuel into their water system and delivering it to their customers. So as a precaution, and I do not want to put our water customers from the Board of Water Supply, the public, at risk by pumping fuel into their drinking water system. So we shut down the shaft before we detected any amounts of fuel in the water.
You have been looking at this issue, I understand, since 2014, Ernie, when there was a massive leak of 27,000 gallons of fuel from one of the tanks. Does it frustrate you that not more has been done to secure this water source?
We've been working for 8 years to ring the alarm bells that this facility needs to be addressed. It needs to be either upgraded to double-walled tanks or completely removed. But for the last 8 years, our voices haven't been heard. We've urged the regulators, the Department of Health, and the U.S. EPA and the Navy to take action to prevent a disaster that would impact heavily our drinking water resource.
The Navy has now stopped operations at the Red Hill fuel storage tanks, which is what you had been calling for. The Hawaii congressional delegation had been calling for that. Governor Ige has said he wants to see those tanks emptied of fuel. Is that satisfactory to you?
This gives us hope that suddenly the key decision makers are voicing their concerns about the facility. What remains, though, Stephanie, is actual implementation. Are they going to carry through, or is the emergency order issued by the health director for the state of Hawaii going to be enforced strictly and hold the Navy accountable? We've seen in the past letters, strongly worded letters sent from our Department of Health and EPA to the Navy, but we haven't really seen the follow through and those regulators holding the Navy accountable. So now is the time to not do that anymore. We really need to get this thing addressed right away as soon as possible. And for the Board of Water Supply, immediate removal of the fuel out of Red Hill is the only real way to reduce this risk, massive risk to our drinking water aquifer. The Navy is experiencing it firsthand right now, and that's very unfortunate. And I feel so terrible for their customers having to endure this and drink the fuel contaminated water. I do not want that to be repeated with the general public. The almost over 400,000 people that we serve water in the city of Honolulu itself. We cannot let that happen. So I need the regulators to hold the Navy accountable. I need the Navy to step forward and not fight us anymore. We've been fighting with them for 8 years to do the right thing to protect the water resource. We've always said to them, you also depend on the resource itself for Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. And they've told us that Red Hill Shaft supplies 24% of their supply for their base. So now, unfortunately, we see firsthand how important clean drinking water is to our community and to the base itself.
Ernest Lau, Chief Engineer with Honolulu's Water Supply Board, thank you so much for joining the News Hour.
Mahalo.
The Navy has suspended use of its Red Hill fuel tanks, part of efforts to mitigate the impact of contamination to drinking water. The Secretary of the Navy and the Chief of Naval Operations were both on Oahu today and held a news conference to address the growing crisis. Governor Ige and the state's congressional delegation have been calling on the Navy to immediately stop its operations of the World War II era Red Hill fuel tanks. Last week, tests revealed petroleum in the tap water going to military homes in the Red Hill area, affecting thousands of customers. That test confirmed numerous complaints from the community of a fuel-like odor coming from their drinking water, with some reporting nausea, headaches, and stomach pain. The Navy Secretary says he's open to suspending all operations at the Red Hill fuel tanks. Late this afternoon, the governor and health department director also ordered the Navy to suspend all operations at the Red Hill fuel tank facility.
We look at all options, and all options are on the table, certainly, but we're looking at some very serious options here in the very near future before I depart the island of Oahu.
We are issuing this emergency order as a matter of public health and to protect the people in our community. Until we are confident that the system is petroleum-free, the Department of Health's advisory that all Navy water system users should not consume water stands.
The emergency order would also require the Navy to empty the tanks of fuel being stored underground, which is estimated at more than 100 million gallons.
We're continuing to monitor the situation at Red Hill. We look forward to receiving more water quality reports or results from both the Navy and the Department of Health, and we reiterate our demand for being in the loop of getting that information in a timely way. We can't wait months to receive that information. We need to have that information as soon as it becomes available to the Department of Health, as soon as the Navy gets the test results, not only for their drinking water source at Red Hill, but also for their monitoring well network that they've installed under the fuel facility and around it. That network is there to look for fuel contamination in the groundwater, and it's to look at how it might be moving. So it's important for us to get that information because that's part of the early warning system. We run the tests at our source, but if we detect it at our source, it is already too late. That means the aquifer, the fuel contaminants have traveled on the groundwater and in the groundwater through the aquifer to our well. So when we already are pumping it up at our well, it's already too late. And there's a potential at that point for that to get into people's homes. So that's what we're trying to avoid here. We still have a window of opportunity, I believe, for prevention of a disaster to our water resources. But that window is closing rapidly. we cannot wait any longer. Before that window closes, then we are in a reactionary response mode dealing with a major contamination problem. So that's the kokua from the community, kokua from the Navy. I respect the military. You know, they provide a vital service to our community, preserving our freedoms. But we also need to preserve the safety and quality of our water resources. So, mahalo. Are there any questions? We have a microphone set up, please.
Ernie, do the results that the Navy revealed last night, it seems like you're taking more precautions each day, but because of the last night's results, this is what's driving you to shut down the Halava shaft, and how concerning are the results that you found out last night?
We're still looking at the, Manolo, we're still looking at the results. We noticed that it was just a spreadsheet summary. For us, our practice is actually, we want to see the complete laboratory report. So the laboratories produce a multi-page report. We want to see the whole report rather than a summary in an Excel spreadsheet that somehow somebody has sat down at a computer and transcribed what is in the laboratory official report into that spreadsheet. We, at the Board of Water Supply, our practice is to actually look at the laboratory report and to analyze it very closely. I understand that the Department of Health has also taken samples, so we're looking eagerly to see the results of those tests. And Manolo, our actions are based on the Navy's admission that last night that their water source was contaminated with petroleum.
Ernie, the fact that the Navy found...
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I'll try to speak up. Does the fact that the Navy detected petroleum in its Red Hill shaft indicate that the aquifer itself is contaminated with petroleum?
You know, based on the Navy's own test data in their test wells, there are some of those monitor wells that are located actually in the lower access tunnel. And we look at the results of over the years of those wells testing the groundwater there, and also the wells nearby outside of the tunnel, outside of the facility. There's clear evidence that fuel contamination of the groundwater in that area has been around for years. So our concern is with the potential volume, the volume of fuel that's stored in that facility in those tanks and transmitted through miles of pipelines in that lower access tunnel, that if there's a large leak, then a contamination plume can start to migrate toward Halava shaft. So the evidence of groundwater contamination at Red Hill in that immediate area below the tanks and near the tanks, and particularly on Navy property, there's been clear evidence from the data that we see that we've obtained from the Navy that there is groundwater contamination there that's petroleum based.
You said that you guys are going to be doing weekly testing. When's the last time you tested your wells?
October of this year.
So we haven't tested the water since the Navy thought that there was a petroleum leak.
Okay, so we only learned about what happened, what's happening with the Navy. Basically Sunday night we started to get calls, I think from families in Navy housing or military housing, calling our control center about problems with taste and smell. We only learned Monday that the problems that the Navy's had. So then we, because we've been up to this point only testing quarterly. So what we did was we put in the request to the laboratory on the mainland to send the containers. And I'd like to ask Mr. Erwin Kawata, head of our water quality division, to kind of give us an update on do we have the containers and when do we expect to do the sampling and get the test results back. Mr. Erwin Kawata.
Thank you, Ernie. As Ernie indicated, the
water source of interest to us is our Halava shaft. I just learned very early this morning that our first sample for Halava shaft was received by the laboratory late yesterday afternoon. So the testing process has already begun as we speak. We expect to get results at least by the end of next week. So I've asked the laboratory to keep me continually abreast as to the testing progress, and everything is being expedited so that we get these results as soon as we can possibly get them.
So I guess up to this point, we don't know if there are no petroleum product in your supply of water.
As of this point, right now, based on any test results, no. However, based on our historical monitoring that we've been doing quarterly over the last 8 years, we don't have any records or any test results showing any indications of petroleum contamination at all at Halava shaft. So it's very reasonable to expect that we don't expect to see any right now. However, and changes in the environment don't happen that fast. However, because of the current situation, it is prudent to increase the level of surveillance so that we don't miss anything. Absolutely.
That's a really good question, and I think that's why we're taking this precautionary approach and originally shutting down by half, and now completely shut down of Halava shaft. But we want to continue to test because the groundwater continues to move. Groundwater is always moving, and it usually moves from the ocean, from the mountains toward the sea and flows out to the sea. In the case of the Halava area, we believe that there is a flow gradient or flow direction across the valley from where the fuel facility is located to where our Halava shaft is located. Are there any other questions?
Ernie, the Navy said last night that they had isolated the source of contamination for their drinking water supply by shutting down the Red Hill shaft. But that obviously doesn't necessarily isolate the source of the contamination that could be contaminating the aquifer. Have you gotten any communications or indications from the Navy or the Department of Health as to what they're doing to try to identify what is contaminating the Red Hill shaft, and anything they're doing to assist you to make sure that that is not going to contaminate your Halava shaft?
Sophie, we've had no communication or indication from the Navy on what they think is the source, but just look at the obvious facts of the situation. Just about 2,600 feet away from the Red Hill shaft, you have stored in underground tanks that are 250 feet high, 100 feet in diameter, each holding 12.5 million gallons of diesel or jet fuel, sitting on the bottoms of which of those tanks are only 100 feet above the drinking water aquifer. You've got 180 plus million gallons of fuel there. And their Red Hill drinking water source is not less than half a mile away. So that, to me, the obvious is the source is ultimately from those tanks. I don't have any analysis, or the Navy hasn't provided information, but I look at the obvious facts of what the situation looks like right now, and to me that is the number one suspect.
Hi, Ernie. So do you think that this possibly started back with the 2014 leak? Because you said this takes a lot of time.
It's a good question. We don't know. The latest leak that occurred of fuel and water, I think the Navy indicated 14,000 gallons. They said it was about a quarter mile south of the fuel tanks, quarter mile south of the fuel tanks. Remember the Navy's Red Hill shaft, or drinking water source, is about a half a mile. So my question to the Navy when I first heard of that, to the Department of Health, I suggested that they should immediately start testing the Red Hill shaft. because that latest release of 14,000 gallons of fuel and water is much closer to Red Hill Shaft than previous events that occurred, say, at the tanks. The other event that is we're still seeking more information on is the May 6th event, when the pipelines that take fuel from the tanks to Pearl Harbor, they had a major break or burst in that pipeline in that lower access tunnels. So, hey, Board of Water Supply, we have almost 350 main breaks a year. We know what a broken pipe under pressure can do and how much can come out of those broken pipes. So the questions are, like, how far down the lower access tunnel did the fuel flow from the broken pipe in that tunnel? And these pipes are exposed in the tunnel. They're hanging on angle irons on the side, or they're coming in from the tanks and on the ceiling. So when they leaked, it would go into the lower access tunnel. And we think that the lower access tunnel is basically lined with some concrete, and it's also a rock. So it is, in our minds, a kind of a porous environment that if fuel leaked out, potentially could leak down through the 100 feet of unsaturated lava rock and eventually get to the groundwater table. That's why we, remember, there are some monitor wells in the lower access tunnel. That's why we really are pushing to get the test results of the groundwater in those monitor wells, especially the ones in the lower access tunnel, to see if they reflected a spike after that May 6th event or after the May 14th event. Again, our decisions should be based on data, on test results, and they should drive our decisions going forward.
Ernie, in terms of shutting down the Halava shaft, how long can it remain shut down for before you have to start implementing some other measures to conserve water or what have you?
Sophie, that's a question that we're going to discover as we go forward. We'll be monitoring closely the demand on the system from our customers, from the businesses, and how our water sources that are taking up the load because Halava Shaft is shut down, and see what's happening there, and also with the underground aquifer they're pumping from. So it is something, and we are looking at ways to how do we keep people informed, how do we keep our customers informed. So a press conference like this might be something in the future. We might try to provide other ways to keep our customers informed about the situation.
The indication seems to be that those compounds were found, but it's at an acceptable level. And can you explain at all what that means? Meaning, it's okay to have that much in there, or what does all that mean?
I'm an engineer, not a chemist, so I don't want to be outside my comfort zone here. So I'm going to ask Mr. Erwin Kawata. He's been with the Board of Water Supply almost 38 years, so in the water quality area. Erwin?
Okay, so yes, we took a look at those results that the Navy provided last night, and several things. Number one, it was just a summary spreadsheet. It showed definitely petroleum levels in Red Hill Shaft, but there's some things that are unusual about what we saw there. Number one, they also collected samples from within the distribution system, from the community, various places like Halsey Terrace Community Park, for example. And there are a lot of calls of petroleum odor within the community, but those test results of those samples shows that there's no petroleum detected. So that, to us, is a little unusual. You would expect to see petroleum results in samples collected from within the distribution system, namely from where, residents' homes or parks or community centers within the distribution system. You would expect to see some petroleum detection there if people are experiencing odor. But those test results all showed those areas to be non-detect. And so that to us is a little bit unusual. Number two, what was a little unusual with those results was the samples from Red Hill Shaft was collected on November 29th. But we understand from the Navy that the Red Hill shaft was shut down on Sunday, the 28th. So what was the sampling conditions under which those samples were collected? What was the conditions of the Red Hill shaft operations during that time? And so we will be sending a letter to the Department of Health, asking them or requesting from them a copy of the actual laboratory reports that reflected all of the results that was provided by the Navy. We'll also be asking them, as Ernie indicated, the results of all the monitoring well testing and continued Red Hill shaft testing that the Navy is going to be doing. And certainly, all the other test results from, other samples collected from, for example, Red Hill Elementary School, to give us some clarity as to what we're actually reading in that report that was provided by the Navy.
When you say clarity, what do you mean? To kind of see
Well, if
more
it
of
was,
how... Go ahead.
yes, for example, if it's non-detect, okay, number one, was the sample collected correctly? Was the analysis done correctly? Yeah, does all of the actual reporting and all of the quality control measures, everything was done correctly? Are those test results actually valid? And if they are, then the next step would be to actually take additional samples to really confirm what you're observing. That's standard practice for us. And so we will be sending a letter to the Department of Health requesting all this additional information so we can better understand what we're actually seeing in that summary table.
These levels, if they are accurate, what the Navy is saying.
Well, again...
acceptable then?
Well, again, if those results are actually acceptable and they were recording no detection in the distribution system, then how do we explain, residents' experiences with odors in their homes and within the community? How do you explain that? Yeah, there has to be some reasonable explanation for that. So that was one of the main things that we saw was very unusual with those results. And, at this point, we don't want to second guess. We certainly appreciate all of the efforts by the Navy and Department of Health to try to ascertain the origin of the problem and so that they can mitigate and correct the situation. But at the same time, too, these testing results need to make sense. They need to reflect what you're actually observing in the community.
What's it going to take to pinpoint a leak?
Well, it will be requiring a complete look at all of the data. And certainly if we have any questions about the laboratory reports, we'd like to pose some questions to either the Department of Health or the Navy about them. And if there's some of the information within that, those laboratory reports indicate that some of this data is a little bit inconclusive or requires further validation, then the next step would be to collect additional samples for confirmatory purposes. And that is really a standard practice. Anytime, like for example for us, when we detect a particular contaminant that we haven't seen before, we don't just rely on one test result. We take multiple test results, samples, to actually validate and confirm that what we're seeing is actually repeatable and is really real. Yeah? And that's standard practice. Any other questions?
How are they talking to you? Are they reaching out to Florida Water Supply to update you all on what's going on? How is the communication going this week?
That's a good question. Initially, there was very little communication for a day or two. So what I did was I requested to Rear Admiral Tim Cott and also Director Char to have a meeting to be updated on the situation. So I'm glad to say we had one meeting this week, and we've established now a weekly standing meeting to get together for them to update us on what they're finding, what they're dealing with, so we also can understand its potential impact on the BWS, on our water sources, and how we need to adjust our operations.
I was also wondering, when the Navy flushes its water system, where does the wastewater go? Is the Navy wastewater treatment plant a Navy wastewater treatment plant or a municipal one? And is it able to remove the fuel from the water? Just trying to figure out where that goes.
I mean, when they're flushing the pipes, I really don't know where the water goes. I'm not familiar with the Navy's water system also, but also how their drainage system is configured and where it discharges into the harbor or the ocean.
Kind of piggybacking off of that, like contaminated water, is there a way to purify it, or is it going into the ocean or potentially back into the ground, into our groundwater, into the aquifer?
That's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that, or very frankly. That's a good question to pose to the Navy, because they are responsible to flush. They've decided to flush their system in that fashion, and they should be able to explain to you that. I would be completely speculating. I don't want to do that. Sorry.
Difficult or easy it might be to identify the source of the pollution. For this, I mean, I know that the Navy has identified it. And is this? Oh, I'm sorry. I asked the wrong question. I was wondering, people are curious about what's. They're worried about their water being affected. I was wondering, since you explained this already, but if you could explain again what the bright line is between the people who are receiving their water from the Navy versus the municipal one. So, for example, if you're a resident of that area and you're worried about where your water comes from, how do you know where it's coming from?
Okay, that's a good question. Are you Christina? Or, I'm sorry. So, there are two ways that the Navy system and the Board of Water Supply system meet, aligned to each other. One way is through the pipe systems. We do have some emergency connections that the military has requested over the years to their water system. Should they have an emergency, they take water from us. It's measured through a meter, so they have to pay for that water. So that's a kind of a direct pipe connection. Those connections actually have what we call a backflow device to prevent water from the Navy system getting back into the Board of Water Supply water system. Maybe you should just leave it there. Sorry. So that's one protection, but we've taken the additional step just this week, given the situation, to actually remove the water meter. So unless there's a water meter there is no physical connection to the Navy system from the Board of Water Supply to the Navy system. And we did that as a precautionary approach, and we felt that our customers would be much more comfortable that there's actually not a direct connection. There is one large connection that we have a closed valve. When Halava Shaft was built in the 1940s, around the time the Red Hill facility was built, and also when the Red Hill Shaft, their drinking water source, was constructed, our 42-inch main had to run through Navy property. It actually runs above the lower access tunnel. That large pipe that brings water to Honolulu is in a larger tunnel, and that pipe is exposed and not buried. And the Navy at the time requested a connection, an emergency connection to their water system. This is in the 40s, so around the time of the war, they were thinking about backup water supply should the base need it. The valve is shut and padlocked in that tunnel. And I'm going to request Admiral Cott the ability to go in there to physically verify that the valve is still shut between the Board of Water Supply system and the Navy system. The other thing that we interface with the Navy with is the underground aquifer. So the only way that we could isolate ourselves from the Navy in the underground aquifer, what they might be doing to that precious underground aquifer, is to shut our pumps down. And that's why we shut down Halava Shaft as a precaution. The Navy, when they're not running, and we're still running, the fear is that we're going to pull the contamination across Halava Valley into our water system. I hope that answered your question. Okay, thank you.
How long do you think it would take for contamination to move from the Navy's groundwater underneath in their part of the aquifer over to the Halava Shaft?
That's a really good question. I'm going to ask Erwin Kawata, who's been working with our technical team on the administrative order and consent, the AOC, that the Navy and the DOH and EPA signed. So Erwin, maybe you can take a stab at answering that question. Thank you.
We've been taking a look at that particular question as to how long it would take, is let's say a release from the tanks to get to Halava Shaft. Our current estimates is anywhere from 6 months to a year. Obviously, if we turn Halava Shaft on, you will shorten that time period because you're getting it moving faster. So that is the reason why we want to shut it down, to prevent it from moving to our source, too fast. Any other questions?
Excavation is required. Who's going to pay for that? Are you equipped?
Question again?
Excavation. Whether or not you need to excavate any groundwater or area where there might be a leak. Are you equipped to dig that deep?
Not sure I understand the question, but...
Is there any excavation involved in finding
Okay,
the source of the problem?
okay. In terms of installing monitor wells, for example, if that's the question, yes, you have to install a drill rig to drill into the substructure, install a casing and your monitor well equipment. There is a cost to do that. Obviously, the deeper you go, the higher the cost. Yes, but there is a cost to do that. We don't have the equipment here. It's a specialized type of equipment. There are contractors on island that can do that work, and so we would contract that work out.
Maybe if I could, is your question about if the tanks leak or the pipes leak fuel into the ground and gets into the lava rock below the tanks and eventually into the underground aquifer, which exists in that porous lava rock? That's a question. I guess you would call that remediation or cleanup. For us, that would be the responsibility of the owner of that facility and that fuel to do the cleanup, not the Board of Water Supply. Whether or not it's even possible after it's left the pipes and the tanks, that's a big question, especially if the volume is very large. It's very different from a fuel leak in the ocean, and that's not a good thing for the environment and the marine and natural life, the birds. But fuel leaks underground in these underground aquifers that exist in the porous lava rock are going to be really hard or impossible to clean up. And if the volume is very large, it may never get cleaned up. But that'll be the responsibility of the owner of the facility and the fuel. I hope that answered your question. Thank you.
Is not the source of the contamination. How else can fuel or any contaminants reach the distribution lines and the wells?
So I want to caveat by this, just say we're kind of speculating and not involved with the investigation. That's the Navy's responsibility. You're saying if the well is not the source of the Red Hill Shaft is not the source, how can this type of contamination get into the system? We have here at the Board of Water Supply, and I know the Navy has their own program too, something called a cross-connection control program. And I'm going to ask Erwin to explain that because it comes under the Water Quality Division for the BWS.
Yes, we have a program that we install what is called backflow preventers to protect our system from customers that are using high amounts of water or using pressurizing their water usage on their side of the property to prevent it from coming back in, siphoning back into our water system. So we have a large number of customers like that, agricultural customers, industrial customers that are using our water within their property but either are pressurizing it for different kinds of purposes, like, spraying or other things. So we require installation of these backflow preventers. They need to be annually tested, and we have inspectors that go out and check as to whether or not all of these backflow preventers meet specifications, are working correctly, so that and if we find any of them that are either deficient, then we'll notify the owner of the property. And if for some reason, and we'll give them time frames for correcting the situation. And if they don't correct the situation on time, we will actually turn off their water service just to protect our water system.
That's another way of being able to contaminate the system without.
That's one way of contaminating the water system, through external usage and stresses onto our water system, yes. Yeah.
Manolo, that's a question best addressed to the Navy if they're looking for that possibility as a source. But as of last night, they did say it was a Red Hill Shaft, their drinking water source. Thank you.
I had a question about the supply. We're managing conserved water and fixing leaks for customers. For more water supply, what is the difference now that you shut down this shaft? And when are you going to be concerned that we're going to need a ration?
Since that only happened last night, we are still monitoring the performance of the water system of our wells. So I think it'll develop over time. We have a control center that operates 24/7, and they monitor and operate the water system. So they'll let us know if they have difficulties. I think one of the signs that we're not keeping up with demand is going to be simply that these water tanks that you see up in the hills on higher elevations, they store water. We pump to those tanks, and from the tanks they feed our customers. If we find that the water levels in those tanks, we're not able to fill the tank in a day, because they go up and down during the day, but they usually are able in a 24-hour period recover and fill up again. We find that the levels in those tanks consistently stay low. That's an indication that demand is outstripping supply. And that's when we're going to be issuing the requests, maybe targeted requests, to different areas of the Honolulu water system. Thank you. Good question.
Do you think at some point, maybe longer term, will it be necessary for the Navy or the state or somebody to start purifying the water because the aquifer is contaminated? I guess to filter out petroleum?
That's a good question. Ern and I have been on this Red Hill situation for nearly 8 years. In the course of that, we've tried to accumulate as much reports that we can get from the Department of Health, the EPA, or the Navy, and they're not classified, they're redacted, but they're Navy reports and data. And we have posted them at boardofwatersupply.com because we feel that that information should be accessible to all the community. This is such an important issue. In that library of documents, there is a report that was done by the Navy in 2010. In 2010, they did a report specifically to look at installing a water treatment system at Red Hill Shaft. Should it be contaminated with petroleum? And that report, which is like a kind of a preliminary report, details what would be necessary to remove the fuel from the water to make it safe to drink, how much it would cost to construct, and how much it would cost each year to operate. So we'd be glad to provide you a copy of that, or refer you to the part of our library of documents on Red Hill where you can see that report. So likewise, that might be something that if the level of contamination is not too great and it's still treatable, to actually install a treatment system, and we're going to have to do an investigation to see if that's even possible for Halava Shaft. Keep in mind the large volume of fuel at Red Hill, over 180 million gallons of diesel and jet fuel. Depending on the size of the leak, the concentration volume of contamination in the groundwater maybe more than can be treated, effectively treated and removed to make the water safe to drink. So at that point then we would have to look for, to drill wells, develop water sources at different locations away from this impacted aquifer so that we can provide safe water to our community. Yes, so Oahu is actually very blessed. We have some very productive aquifers, and particularly the Pearl Harbor aquifer is the largest on the island of Oahu. It's very permeable or very porous. They can produce large volumes of water. Not all the aquifers are as productive on Oahu, but especially the Pearl Harbor aquifer, in particular the Waimalu aquifer and the Mauna aquifer, where the Red Hill facility is located, where our lava shaft is located, is very productive. Being very productive means that the aquifer is very permeable or porous. It also means that the aquifer is susceptible easily to contamination. So activities that occur over the aquifer, it's important that they not introduce contamination that could affect the quality of the water in those aquifers. And in this case, it's that Red Hill facility there. We've been told by the Navy that's maybe the largest in the nation in one location. So that's why 8 years ago in 2014, we said that this is a concern. It's a potential disaster waiting to happen. We don't know. I'm sorry? Well, first of all, I'd like to point out that the scale of the contamination impact on a water system in this situation is pretty unprecedented for Oahu. I don't believe we've ever seen a kind of a widespread contamination of a drinking water system on Oahu due to petroleum, due to fuel. So we really don't know how long it's going to take to complete that investigation. An investigation of this type is almost like solving a mystery. You're trying to, through a process of elimination, using data to eliminate different potential sources of that source of the contamination. And you really need to identify the source of contamination and be confident in that to be able to solve the problem. So I'm sorry, I don't know the time it'll take for the Navy to do this.
What do you guys need to hear from the Navy in order to open the lava shaft back up?
I need to see them taking some immediate action to start to reduce the amount of fuel stored at Red Hill. Also, we need quick access to information. And for your information too, I intend to go to the Board of Water Supply for authorization to amend our capital improvement program budget for the current year to add in a new monitor well that will be like the Sentinel well or the watchdog well in the valley, Halava Valley, to start to and see if identify if there's a potential plume moving underground across the valley. Also, I think it's understanding what created the problems at Red Hill Shaft, what has actually leaked, especially the recent occurrences that may have affected Red Hill Shaft. What is the cause? How much fuel has really been released? And what are the risks? But the only way to eliminate the risks that we currently face is to reduce the amount of fuel actually stored in those tanks and pipes and take some immediate action to do that. The longer they stay there, the longer the risk is there, and over time that risk grows. The Navy's requested to wait to be given up to 2045 to do that, to upgrade those tanks. We don't think that is reasonable. We cannot wait that long.
You get the results next week for the Halava shaft, and it says that, you know, everything is good. I mean, is that a definitive result, meaning we can all rest easy as far as Honolulu residents? Because I know, because Erwin also says, well, if it could drift from 6 months to a year as far as contaminants moving through the aquifer, then could we be in a bad situation 6 months to a year from now?
Potentially, Manolo, that could be the situation, but what we don't want to do is start pumping Halava shaft again and accelerate that time frame. 6 months to a year is not enough time to get an alternative water supply in place or a treatment system for Halava shaft. So what we're going to do is consider Halava shaft as if we have a major main break, and for a short duration of time we need additional capacity in the system to meet the demand at the time, we may have to pump Halava shaft for a little while. So I want to keep Halava shaft pure and clean as long as I possibly can by not pumping it. Yeah.
But if you get the results next week saying it's clear, you'll still
that is only one point in time. That tells me only the moment. It doesn't tell me what's happening, may happen over time. We'll keep it shut down until we are assured that there is no risk that we turn it on and there's a risk that we might draw it and deliver it to our customers.
So you could be shutting it down for several months as well.
It will not be a short duration. Okay, so we only learned that Red Hill Shaft was not operating or pumping on Tuesday. So we took actions then to reduce it by 50%. I guess we could have considered shutting it down sooner, but the Navy, we're waiting to see what the Navy's results were and what the Navy said as the cause of the problem. And last night, although we have questions about their results, we are looking for other Department of Health results to validate that. But the Navy came out last night and said that their source is going to remain shut down because it's got petroleum contamination. Yes, of course. We want to get all the data that they have on their water quality analysis, including the information they're collecting from the customers' homes, because that's all part of understanding the whole picture, the full picture of what occurred here to create this major problem for their water system. And then be very confident and clear about the root cause of the problem. But in the meantime, the risk to the aquifer is still there with the whole fuel facility still continuing to operate. And that is a real risk. We sent a letter to the Director of Health and to the Admiral about that earlier this week, but we haven't received an official response.
No, about last night.
Okay, so okay, so this is not indicative of, I'm sure, what the Navy wants to do going forward, but I just mahalo to Director Char and her team because we got the results last night from the Department of Health. We did not get any communication from the Navy on the results. Although
what the hell was that sound?
Next week when we have our weekly standing
What the hell was that noise?
I'm going to reiterate my request to them.
How weird, Joe.
That they send the results also directly to us.
But you've already requested more information about last night's results, though, or you haven't?
We're going to do that actually through the Director of Health.
Okay.
Yeah. And that letter is going to go out today.
This fix.
Okay, that looks like the That looks like the end of that. But let me just double check. We're gonna reset right now. I guess that's what you can call this, a reset. I'm obviously playing interviews live, previously live interviews of Department of Water Commissioner Ernie Lau, as well as the military's response, their audio, which is coming up right now. Well, this is the senators meeting on the topic of Red Hill. This is on December 10th. It was done online. Senate and the House of Representatives.
Okay, aloha everyone. Welcome to this joint legislative briefing between the Senate committees on health, on agriculture and the environment, and public safety, intergovernmental and military affairs, and the House committees on health, human services, and homelessness, energy and environmental protection, and corrections, military, and veterans. I'm Senator Jared Kilkalole, Chair of the Senate Health Committee. This Zoom meeting and YouTube live stream event will be streamed live, including the links to viewing options for this proceeding can be found on the live and on-demand video page of the legislature's website. I'd like to thank the joint committees in the Senate for joining us for this briefing today on the Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam water system contamination update. And I'd also like to thank our friends from the House of Representatives for convening this joint committee briefing so we can all be together here to hear the updates and answer some questions. So to facilitate the briefing, I will yield to my fellow co-chair from the House, Representative Yamane.
Thank you, Chair Kilkalole. Before we begin, everybody would like to thank and extend a warm thank you to the Senate. Senate Chair has worked really closely with the House to present this. We also would like to extend to the presenters an appreciation ahead of time.
The best audio they got. It's ridiculous.
As well as we are very appreciative of your participation and the willingness to bring in those decision makers of the top levels to be participatory and engage with us legislators who represent the people of Hawaii. So
I'll make it louder.
As you know, our agenda will be, we'll be providing the Navy the first 30 minutes, and we'll be moving to the Department of Health, where Director Char and her team will present for 20 minutes, and then finally we will move to Board of Water Supply for 10 minutes. While the presentations are going, members, if you can remain on mute, keep your microphones off. If not, the IT service divisions, both in the Senate and the House, will do a great job. We'll be muting members. So we shall begin. In response to this significant event, we were able to secure one of the top level individuals within the Navy. We would like to introduce Samuel J. Paparo, who is the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Admiral, please begin.
Thank you so much, Representative Yamane. Thank you very much. Aloha, and thank you so much to the senators and representatives for welcoming me to speak with you today. By saying that from the very beginning, the crisis that we're in right now, the water crisis, the Navy is responsible for this crisis. We are taking ownership of the solutions, and we are going to fix it. We're in the process of fixing this. Throughout the entire process, the Navy has been working very closely
and we should
with Dr.
believe
Kathy
them. Why?
Ho, Dr. Libby Schar, the Hawaii Department of Health, Mr. Ernie Lau, the Honolulu Board of Water Supply, and Mr. Jeff Scott, EPA Region 9. This profound partnership, absolutely magnificent support by the Department of Health, the Board of Water Supply, and the EPA has been typified by compassion for our families. And just speaking for the entire United States Marine Corps, all of the families, we could not be more grateful. Our paramount obligation is to protect the health and well-being of all of the people. We are so very grateful. In order to achieve this, the Navy's #1 priority is to remediate the water system by eliminating the source of contaminants to ensure the safety of the water supply to families. In consultation with the Hawaii Department of Health, the Navy's been persistently testing, assessing, and testing again throughout the Navy water supply system, along with a number of other specific actions, which we will detail for the committees as we move forward. We're just so very appreciative to the outpouring of support and coordination, the collaboration between the Navy, the Department of Health, the Bureau of Water Supply, the EPA, as we work together for the health and for the well-being of our people and of the community. This past week, Secretary of the Navy and the Chief of Naval Operations saw firsthand the effects, and they have empowered me to bring the full resources of the United States Navy to fix this problem. All organizations within this response report directly to me, and I am accountable for this fix. As soon as we heard on the 28th of November, the issues related to odors in the water supply, my immediate action was to activate what is called in military circles a crisis action team, putting my absolute #1 officer on my staff in charge, the Deputy Commander, Rear Admiral Blake Converse, putting him in charge of that team. The team comprises members from the Navy, from the Army, from the Air Force, from the Marine Corps, with profound participation of the Department of Health, the EPA, and other organizations that work with the experts here in Hawaii and on the mainland. Admiral Converse and the senior members of his team will brief you for the next 30 minutes as they brief me almost every hour of every day.
Is that the Big Island?
On what has happened, who is affected, what is being done, the timeline for resolution. I know as a separate but related matter that there's interest in the order issued by the Department of Health related to the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility. The Navy Litigation Office is reviewing the order and will put out more information on that topic on the December 16th hearing. What I can absolutely say unequivocally is that the Secretary of the Navy has ordered the suspension of operations at the Red Hill fuel storage facility, as well as other steps that are consistent with that order that I previously mentioned. And I would like to now turn it over to Admiral Converse, the Director of the Joint Crisis Action Team. He has members of his leadership team, our leadership team, that would like to speak and will be ready to answer questions in detail from the engineering, civil engineering community, from the medical community, and can discuss comprehensively the steps that we're taking. And I will end as I began with profound appreciation for the partnership with the state of Hawaii as we all compassionately join together to solve this problem. My very deepest thanks.
Aloha and good afternoon. I'm Admiral Blake Converse, And as I said at our first publicized town hall, and I'm going to say here again, I am deeply sorry to both our housing residents and to the citizens of Hawaii that this event happened. As Admiral Paparo said, we, the Navy, own this problem. We're going to fix it, and we're going to take care of the military residents and every individual impacted as we do that. I'd like to outline for you a timeline of the events that led to the contamination of our water system, and to discuss with you what we're going to do to take care of those affected and recover that water system. To do that, I brought with me our Navy's chief engineer in the Pacific, Admiral Dean Vanderlei, right over here on my right, on my left, on your right. And he's going to discuss the details of our plan to clean up and restore the water distribution system and the Red Hill water shaft. And our Pacific Fleet Chief Medical Officer, right here, Captain Mike McGinnis, will also discuss the Joint Medical Outreach Program and the support effort we're providing to all of those who are affected. And then certainly he'll be available to answer any of your questions that you may have regarding the health impact of this event. First, I'd like to discuss the timeline for these events. On the 20th of November, a spill of jet fuel, specifically JP5 jet fuel, occurred at the Red Hill Bulk Fuel Storage Facility in an access tunnel that provides fire suppression and service lines for the facility. That fuel spill was cleaned up, and on the 23rd of November, Admiral Paparo directed an independent investigation of the spill and ordered that the investigating officer also determine any connection between the 20 November event and the spill that occurred earlier this year on the 6th of May. We expect that investigation to wrap up sometime in January, and that will address not just the cause of those events, but also will form the basis for accountability actions. Subsequently, on the 27th of November, the commander of Navy Region Hawaii, Admiral Tim Cott, met with the Fleet Logistics Center commander who operates the Red Hill Fuel Storage Facility for the Navy, and they jointly made the decision to stop Red Hill tank fuel transfer operations based on an ongoing investigation that Admiral Paparo had directed into those recent spills. Subsequently, on the 28th of November, the Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam headquarters and the Hawaii Department of Health began receiving phone calls from military residents reporting a chemical or petroleum taste and a smell to the water on the Navy's drinking water system that services those facilities. As more calls started trickling in, it became clear that the reports were all clustered around groupings of neighborhoods, all that were serviced by the Red Hill shaft well. So the Navy, on the evening of the 28th of November, shut down that well and stood up the region's Emergency Operations Center to handle the issue. As more calls continued to come in of the contaminated water, Admiral Paparo, as a senior commander in Hawaii, ordered the establishment of a Joint Crisis Action Team and assigned me to lead that team. My first act on the 29th as a Joint Crisis Action Team commander was to call the Deputy Director of the Department of Health, introduce myself, discuss the situation, and get aligned on what we were seeing and set conditions to stay aligned in both our communications and our actions. Over the course of the next week and a half, we pursued 4 priorities within that Joint Crisis Action Team. Number 1 was to clean up the Red Hill well, and Admiral Dean Vanderlei will address that shortly. Number 2 was to take care of the residents affected by this crisis, both military and civilian, with every tool we had available, and I'll discuss that in a moment. Number 3 was to identify the contaminant, how it got into the drinking water system, and how we were going to get it cleaned out. We know now with a high degree of confidence, based on water testing results analyzed at a certified independent third-party laboratory, that the contaminant is JP5 jet fuel. And that testing also indicates that the fuel is from a relatively new release. So from the test results and engineering analysis that we've done to date, it appears some quantity of JP5 jet fuel entered the Red Hill well in a single event, likely from the 20 November spill, and then was subsequently pumped from that well and distributed throughout those portions of our Navy's water distribution system fed by the Red Hill well. We're also confident that this event was not a result of a leak from one of the Red Hill tanks. Finally, our fourth priority, we have initiated cleanup of our drinking water system in close coordination with both the Department of Health and the EPA and other federal and state entities. We recognize that the crisis that we're encountering right now has had a huge impact on our families. And in fact, even if one family was impacted, it would be too many. We have an all-hands-on-deck effort to take care of every single person impacted, and we've issued joint public health guidance, medical guidance, that applies to all affected residents, and it was generated in consultation with the Department of Health and the chief medical officers of all 4 services here on island. And that's now posted on the Navy's event website and the Department of Health website. In partnership with other services affected, we've established water distribution sites, we've set up temporary showers and laundry facilities across the affected communities. We're providing alternate housing for affected residents. We've moved over 3,000 families to date to local hotels across the island. We've established a network of legal and medical services, including expanding clinic hours, dedicated legal and medical teams focused on the crisis, and mobile medical teams in the community. I've done several town halls to understand the needs of our families, and we've gone back to every one of those and adjusted our actions after those meetings to meet the needs of our residents. We have a 24/7 regional operations center set up and fielding calls every minute. We have a medical hotline, and we're in the process of establishing an interactive online registry to document those that have been affected by this event. This crisis has also impacted child development centers, schools, and facilities on our federal installations and in our housing areas, and we're actively addressing those needs. Last week, I visited Ms. Comeri McMoss, who's the principal of the Red Hill Elementary School, and Ms. Celeste Aiku, the principal of the Holy Family Catholic Academy. Both of those schools are in the Navy's water system and were in affected areas. And I can assure you that we have teams supporting their needs every single day. And we're touching bases with them every day to make sure that we are actually addressing every one of their needs, from drinking water to sanitation to other impacts. I visited also last week with Ms. Tomoko Dangerfield, who's the director of our network of child development centers, because some of those centers are also in the affected areas. She explained to me that while they had sufficient drinking water and facilities for sanitation, they didn't have a way to do laundry. They do now. We have a military team, in fact, a set of Marines that's delivering for them fresh, clean laundry and going back, taking their dirty laundry and cleaning it and bringing it back to us. The bottom line, we have a responsibility to our military residents to provide safe drinking water, and we have a whole of Navy and joint force effort focused on meeting that need. We're committed to taking care of affected residents, to cleaning up the water supply and fixing the Red Hill well. And we're working closely with the EPA, the Department of Health, local and state governments, and a congressional delegation to do it right and to do it as fast as possible. Now I'll turn over to Mike Admiral Dean Vanderlei, who will describe our plan for restoring safe drinking water and for
Please
fixing the
stand
Red
by
Hill
as we
well.
figure out what's going on with our
So aloha, and good afternoon. My name is Dean Vanderlei. I am the commander of Naval Facilities Engineering Command Pacific. I'm the Pacific Fleet Civil Engineer. And most importantly to you, I am the Navy purveyor of water here in Hawaii and across the Pacific. So to say that another way, I am the Navy's Board of Water Supply for the Pacific. My goal here in a few short minutes is to give you an overview of the Navy water system.
We'll also discuss the Joint Medical Outreach Program
by eliminating the source of contaminants to ensure the safety of the water supply to families. In consultation with the Hawaii
Yeah, go take a break and
Department
come
of
back.
Health.
I'm going to work on this.
The Navy's
live.
been persistently testing,
take a few
assessing,
minutes.
and testing again throughout the Navy water supply system, along with a number of other specific actions, which we will detail for the committees as we move forward. We're just so very appreciative to the outpouring of support and coordination, the collaboration between the Navy, the Department of Health, the Bureau of Water Supply, the EPA, as we work together for the health and for the well-being of our people and of the community. This past week, Secretary of the Navy and the Chief of Naval Operations saw firsthand the effects, and they have empowered me to bring the full resources of the United States Navy to fix this problem. All organizations within this response report directly to me, and I am accountable for this fix. As soon as we heard on the 28th of November the issues related to odors in the water supply, my immediate action was to activate what is called in military circles a crisis action team, putting my absolute #1 officer on my staff in charge, the Deputy Commander, Rear Admiral Blake Converse, putting him in charge of that team. The team comprises members from the Navy, from the Army, from the Air Force, from the Marine Corps, with profound participation of the Department of Health, the EPA, and other organizations that work with the experts here in Hawaii and on the mainland. Admiral Converse and the senior members of his team will brief you for the next 30 minutes as they brief me almost every hour of every day on what has happened, who is affected, what is being done, the timeline for resolution. I know as a separate but related matter that there's interest in the order issued by the Department of Health related to the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility.
We're just going to jump right in
Litigation
here.
Office is reviewing the order and will put out more information on that topic on the December 16th hearing. What I can absolutely say unequivocally is that the Secretary of the Navy has...
Aloha, this is Kamahana. I welcome you if you're watching the replay. I welcome you if you come in and go as you please, no problem. If you're just here to listen, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand. But we're going to be listening to the Senate and the House of Representatives in an emergency meeting discussing the contamination of our water table with the potential of permanently poisoning our water system irreversibly. Unable to be filtered, permanent. This is the Senate and the House of Representatives of the state of Hawaii, so-called state. There's rules to becoming a state, and if you knew how a territory becomes a state, you would understand that Hawaii is not a state, not legally. Here we go.
Okay, aloha everyone. Welcome to this joint legislative briefing between the Senate committees on health, on agriculture and the environment, and public safety, intergovernmental and military affairs, and the House committees on health, human services, and homelessness, energy and environmental protection, and corrections, military, and veterans. I'm Senator Jarrett Kilokalole, Chair of the Senate Health Committee. This Zoom meeting and YouTube live stream event.
We're just going to do this again. I often get kicked out, and I don't believe that it's from an algorithm. I believe it's purposeful, so whatever. We'll start again. No problem. I got all day to save my water. Aloha.
And the House committees
Just a second while I queue it up. Check.
Okay, aloha everyone. Welcome to this joint legislative briefing between the Senate committees on health, on agriculture and the environment, and public safety, intergovernmental and military affairs, and the House committees on health, human services, and homelessness, energy and environmental protection, and corrections, military, and veterans. I'm Senator Jared Kihokalole, Chair of the Senate Health Committee. This Zoom meeting and YouTube live stream event will be streamed live, including the links to viewing options for this proceeding can be found on the live and on-demand video page of the legislature's website. I'd like to thank the joint committees in the Senate for joining us for this briefing today on the Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam water system contamination update. And I'd also like to thank our friends from the House of Representatives for convening this joint committee briefing so we can all be together here to hear the updates and answer some questions. So to facilitate the briefing, I will yield to my fellow co-chair from the House, Representative Yamane.
Thank you, Chair Kihokalole. Before we begin, everybody would like to thank and extend a warm thank you to the Senate. Senate Chair has worked really closely with the House to present this. We also would like to extend to the presenters an appreciation ahead of time that you guys will maintain proper decorum, as well as we are very appreciative of your participation and the willingness to bring in those decision makers of the top levels to be participatory and engage with us legislators who represent the people of Hawaii. So as you know, our agenda will be, we'll be providing the Navy the first 30 minutes, and we'll be moving to the Department of Health, where Director Char and her team will present for 20 minutes, and then finally we will move to Board of Water Supply for 10 minutes. While the presentations are going, members, if you can remain on mute, keep your microphones off. If not, the IT service divisions, both in the Senate and the House, will do a great job. We'll be muting members. So we shall begin. In response to this significant event, we were able to secure one of the top level individuals within the Navy. We would like to introduce Samuel J. Paparo, who is the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Admiral, please begin.
Thank you so much, Representative Yamane. Thank you very much. Aloha, and thank you so much to the senators and representatives for welcoming me to speak with you today. I am Admiral Samuel Paparo, Commander of the United States Pacific Fleet. And let me start off by saying that from the very beginning, the crisis that we're in right now, the water crisis, the Navy is responsible for this crisis.
Let us start again.
Ownership of the...
So we shall begin. In response to this significant event, we were able to secure one of the top level individuals within the Navy. We would like to introduce Samuel J. Paparo, who is the commander of the Pacific Fleet. Admiral, please begin.
Thank you so much, Representative Yamane. Thank you very much. Aloha, and thank you so much to the senators and representatives for welcoming me to speak with you today. I am Admiral Samuel Guevara, Commander of the United States Pacific Fleet. And let me start off by saying that from the very beginning, the crisis that we're in right now, the water crisis, the Navy is responsible for this crisis. We are taking ownership of the solutions, and we are going to fix it. We're in the process of fixing this. Throughout the entire process, the Navy has been working very closely with Dr. Kathy Ho, Dr. Libby Shar, the Hawaii Department of Health, Mr. Ernie Lau, the Honolulu Board of Water Supply, and Mr. Jeff Scott, EPA Region 9. This profound partnership, absolutely magnificent support by the Department of Health, the Board of Water Supply, and the EPA has been typified by compassion for our families. And just speaking for the entire United States Marine Corps, all of the families, we could not be more grateful. Our paramount obligation is to protect the health and well-being of all of the people. We are so very grateful. In order to achieve this, the Navy's #1 priority is to remediate the water system by eliminating the source of contaminants to ensure the safety of the water supply to families. In consultation with the Hawaii Department of Health, the Navy's been persistently testing, assessing, and testing again throughout the Navy water supply.
We're going to start that over again because it is so important.
Website.
Is the Commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet.
Here we go.
Admiral, please begin.
Thank you so much, Representative Yamane. Thank you very much. Aloha, and thank you so much to the senators and representatives for welcoming me to speak with you today. I am Admiral Samuel Guevara, Commander of the United States Pacific Fleet. And let me start off by saying that from the very beginning, the crisis that we're in right now, the water crisis, the Navy is responsible for this crisis. We are taking ownership of the solutions, and we are going to fix it. We're in the process of fixing this. Throughout the entire process, the Navy has been working very closely with Dr. Kathy Ho, Dr. Libby Shar, the Hawaii Department of Health, Mr. Ernie Lau, the Honolulu Board of Water Supply, and Mr. Jeff Scott, EPA Region 9. This profound partnership, absolutely magnificent support by the Department of Health, the Board of Water Supply, and the EPA has been typified by compassion for our families. And just speaking for the entire United States Marine Corps, all of the families, we could not be more grateful. Our paramount obligation is to protect the health and of all of the people. We are so very grateful. In order to achieve this, the Navy's #1 priority is to remediate the water system by eliminating the source of contaminants to ensure the safety of the water supply to families. In consultation with the Hawaii Department of Health, the Navy's been persistently testing, assessing, and testing again throughout the Navy water supply system, along with a number of other which for the committees as